All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the LCI Green Room for a special live stream edition where we're going to be doing some election night coverage. We're going to have different people, not just going to be me the entire night, so don't worry. Please don't be scared away. You're not just going to have to hear me ramble on, but we're going to have Doug and Matthew will be joining me soon. Norman Horn will be on, and we're also going to have some other guests who will be shuffling in and out, and I won't announce them yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll also, here at the beginning, while I'm kind of just waiting for people to come in and start watching, and we're still pretty early in reporting yet, so there's not too much to comment on. But we will definitely take comments, questions. If anyone has anything in the comments, we can definitely take that. Voluntary Liberal said first. Yes, you were first. But as Jesus said, the first shall be last. And so therefore, whatever contest you were trying to win, you have lost, unfortunately. I'm just kidding. Appreciate you being here. Voluntary Liberal. Also, thank you, Ricky, for coming in from X. We are streaming to my YouTube channel, the Biblical Anarchy YouTube channel. We're streaming to the Libertarian Christian YouTube channel, as well as to X. But it's always better if you watch it on YouTube. I think it's a more user-friendly experience, and it's easier for, I think, me to see the chats and comments and things like that and respond to you. So appreciate you guys coming in. Christian Libertarian for almost 20 years, Ricky. That is impressive. I feel like we need to make a special plaque for you from LCI. So email me, jacob@libertarianchristians.com, and we'll give you, it'll be like, it could be like a recovering statist award, right? So like they do in AA, for recovering alcoholics, where they get badges or little plaques for how many years sober. You are 20 years sober of statism as a Christian. So I think that is worth celebrating. So shoot me an email. We'll definitely give you an award for that. That's worth. So I am only, let's see, what is I think I became a libertarian in 2018. So what, that makes 6 years. So I'm 6 years sober from my belief in the legitimacy of the beast we call the state. Norman Horn likes that idea, so I think that'll do it. We should do that. We should have some tiered rewards actually every year. It'll be like the Emmys, or it'll be like the football awards, like when they give out like the MVP and the offensive player of the year and stuff like that. But we'll do it for libertarian Christians. And this award will be like what's the one in baseball for when you've played a long time, like the Iron Man record. I think like Lou Gehrig had it, and then Cal Ripken got it. I don't know if that's ever been beaten. I'm not here to talk about baseball though. Voluntary Liberal said that he became a libertarian when he was 16. I had a job, and I was afraid of Biden's $15 minimum wage would make me lose it. That is definitely something that happens. And on one hand, it is cool to see how there's like completely automated McDonald's and other restaurants out there now. But, partly what's spurring that on, the people losing jobs, is the fact that minimum wage kind of spurs on. It's like, well, we could pay an employee $15 an hour or $20 an hour, or we can get a robot to do it for us. And the robot won't show up late. So let's see. We got some people already in the backstage here. I think we're waiting on Doug, our fearless CEO/content director, to finish. Oh, okay. That is a lovely background we got going on here. We're going to take a moment of silence for Peanut the Squirrel. Take off your hats and put your hand over your heart, and we'll sing the
Peanut song.
Yeah, the Peanut. I don't know what the Peanut song is. Well, boys, how you guys doing tonight?
We're doing all right, man.
Doing great, sir. How are you?
I'm great. Are you ready to save the country?
I already did it yesterday.
Only Jesus can save the country, Jacob. You should know better.
Well, I just became a heretic. Sorry.
Well,
Boy.
I was told that if I didn't vote for... I was told if I didn't vote for Kamala Harris that I hated democracy, which... I mean,
I kind of do hate democracy.
Which is... I was like, well...
Don't tempt me.
I don't know.
Don't tempt me. Yeah. You had me at hello.
Right.
Democracy is kind of like a favorite word lately, where it's like both sides are basically blaming the other they're like, well, democracy is ended if the other person gets elected.
Yes.
And
It's not ended if I get elected.
Right.
Right.
Well, right. I love it. The candidate who was not democratically elected for the candidate as a candidate is not only the Democratic Party. Okay, so it's based on the name, right? Candidate also is somebody who is the one decrying that it'll be the end of democracy.
How does any one person save democracy? Doesn't that just kind of not gel whatsoever?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it reminds me of the statement. It's like, I wish the president had so little power that it didn't matter who was who was the president.
Exactly.
As opposed to the president having so much power, it doesn't matter who's the president.
Right.
It's like, wait a second.
That's a weird horseshoe theory right there. It's like no matter what, if it's too much or too little power, it's like, well, it doesn't matter who's in there.
Yeah.
It's
we have a lot of favorite words out there, and do you know what Trump's favorite word is, Jacob?
I believe his favorite word is bigly, but after that it would be tariffs. He's going to have his tariffs are going to be bigly, probably.
His tariffs are going to be bigly.
Yes.
There's one aspect, though, of this tariffs thing that I find interesting that I would like to discuss with you. But before we get to that, I do want to ask you guys kind of an icebreaker question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Jacob, you ready?
I'm ready.
You've got to answer.
I'm sitting down.
You've got to answer first. You're our fearless leader. You ready? Here we go. What was the most embarrassing candidate you voted for?
Oh, God, that's easy. Hillary Clinton.
Oh, you voted for Hillary?
I voted for... I didn't want... So, listen, I was a Bernie Sanders Democrat. Bernie got totally screwed. I was mad. I was getting ready to, not vote and just say, screw it all. Yep. But my sister and some of my friends were just so into the Trump is Hitler and we had to stop him, and so they drove me to the poll, and I was just kind of reluctantly from peer pressure doing it at that time, and did not like casting that vote. And so that's my most.
You did it kind of like this.
It's not. That is probably the biggest mark on my voting record.
Oh, and we can find that out.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. There's records.
Is there?
Sir.
Yeah. I voted for John McCain and Sarah Palin.
You voted for John McCain.
Yeah. But so here's the thing with the first Obama election. If I knew what I believe today, or if I believed what I believed now,
what you believed now.
Yeah. There's an echo
twice.
Here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. But I would have voted for Barack Obama because he was the peace candidate. Thankfully, by the time he was halfway through his 3 years into his term,
launched all those bombs.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? They were diversity bombs. So
okay.
Anyway,
it's very peaceful after the bomb land. Do you know what I mean? There's just no life. Yeah. There's no movement. There's no activity.
It was Mitch Romney. Mitt Romney. Sorry,
Mitt Romney.
Yes, it was Mitt Romney. Mormon milquetoast himself.
Okay.
Okay. That was pretty bad.
Well, did you know Sam Harris? He said that he would vote for Mitt Romney over Donald Trump.
Really?
Yeah. He was anybody but he's an anybody but Trump TDS kind of guy.
See, okay, now and help me understand this. And I'm not going to. Okay, so I voted for Trump. Okay, I'm just going to put it out there.
All right.
And I'm okay with people knowing that. Until they put me up against the wall and they say who you voted for, then I'm going to say Jesus. And then they'll probably shoot me anyway. So
you're going to deny Trump 3 times before the rooster crows, Matt?
Oh gosh, we haven't even brought on our first guest.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I don't even know where I was going with the story. Anyway, so I voted for Mitt Romney. Yes. And it wasn't.
So it
wasn't that bad.
Which is more embarrassing, voting for Mitt Romney or voting for Trump?
Mitt Romney, of course. I mean, at least Trump has some scruples that I think are at least interesting. I mean, he is talking a lot about no taxes on things, and I think that's probably what I find interesting.
What's a tariff?
Listen, I'm not saying that he is absolutely pure in his no taxes, because a tariff is a tax, absolutely. But the idea, and one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and I want to get to later after I say this one thing, is the idea of a tariffs-only economy.
Yeah.
Which we're still paying for those things.
I don't think you realize this, but we actually have an expert on tariffs ready to join our chat.
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh, if only.
If only. I'm going to bring him in. If you guys don't know who Jack Lloyd is, you're going to know very soon in the next 15 minutes after we're done. Hey, Jack, how's it going? Hey. I don't know if you realize, but I tried 3 times to segue you in. Because I didn't tell Matt what we were doing.
I think that
we are being guided. Listen, just like Abiar Malay's hair, we are being guided by the spontaneous hand of the market here on this stream. Like when we say the green room is open and unscripted, I can't stress to you how unscripted this is.
How unscripted it is.
I even tried to script.
By the way, thanks for all those jokes and questions that you sent me, Jacob. I appreciate that. Oh, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, anyway.
Hey, Jack, I appreciate you being here. And Matt, I want to talk about this because it's been kind of the thing in the last, 2 weeks maybe, that Trump is like, hey, we should have a tariff-only economy. We had it about 110 or so years ago.
It was so great back in the 1800s when we had a tariff-only country.
Yeah.
It was fantastic back then. We had steel mills and we had all kinds of things going on.
It seems to me, and I'll make the like.
That's not the only time I'm going to do a Trump impression.
Nope, it won't be. That's why I have you here. I will say that there is a poor man's appeal to, or the common man appeal to this idea for a number of reasons. One is instead of income taxes, you only pay taxes on what you spend. And also that soaks the rich a little bit more, so that'll satisfy the progressives. So the rich people buy more, and therefore they're happy because Elon Musk has to pay more in taxes simply because he wants to consume. It also discourages a consumer economy. There's all kinds of different reasons why tariffs are attractive to people. Jack, you're grinning here. You're like, I can take all these down, and I know you can. And I'm only trying my best to steelman the position a lot of people have. Why is Matthew wrong to like Trump for this reason?
Wow, that happened quickly.
There are many reasons to not like what he's doing, but the tariffs thing's always interesting to dissect because people automatically assume that there's just one layer to anything with economics, right? And that's always, I think, the Achilles heel for the average person is they only look at the immediate, but never the and then what, and then what, and then what. And so when it comes to the tariffs proposition, I mean, there's 2 ways to look at this. There's the reality of what Trump can do. He's just the president. He doesn't control a Congress. He can't just go unilaterally change the 16th Amendment. So there's what he has the capacity to do and his history and, what he might likely do. And then there's just the economic side of things and what's going on there. So when he talks about tariffs, just off the bat, is it likely that he is individually able to completely abolish the agency, completely get rid of all these regulations and completely eliminate the income tax unilaterally and all of Congress going to go along with this or enough, to get it passed and all that stuff? That would be very unlikely, right? So realistically, what would happen? We would have, like we had before, he's going to successfully pass tariffs. And of course, he's going to be encouraged by people like before he had a board member who was in steel who said, you got to add the steel tariffs. And so there's going to be pressures for that. But the idea that he's going to unilaterally take down the income tax and all these other regulations, stuff like that, is kind of silly. But
do you have any hope that there's a Ron Paul in the works to help audit or end the Fed?
No, I mean, we look at things realistically, right? Like Ron Paul doesn't tweet. He's 89. He's already on the decline, physically. He has to be carried around, on a private airplane, doesn't fly, commercial, anything like that. So that's kind of silly. He's well past that age where he would be able to do those kinds of things. So it's I don't think that's a material thing. And most of what people have seen are just memes, right? So they take the memes that are made, whether it's by Elon or sharing from somebody else, and they take that as reality. But of course, there's a big difference between
Jack.
you know, him and me.
All we have are the memes, man. That's all we got.
I know.
The greatest meme to rule them all.
There's no one, like, you're sitting there in the ballot and you're like, okay, you know, Kamala's like, and Chase is like, and then Trump is like, okay, I know he's probably not going to deliver on 99.9 or 100% of the things he's promised, but man, at least the memes are dope. I mean, that's.
You have to do the economics of the unmeme. Now, you know what I mean? You got to look at both memes that are there in front of you and the ones that are not in front of you. And I
yes.
That seriously, because a lot of people look at confirmation bias. They see them post, you know, different things and like, oh, that's me. See, there's something with Ron Paul as Libertarian. And I say, okay, keep scrolling. And you'll see he's posting from Democrat, you know, insiders with him like Tulsi, right? Or RFK. And he's promoting their positions and their, you know, policy ideas, right? So this idea that it's just one-sided is silly, because all you have to do is go look around and be like, oh, right, Trump literally shakes hands with tons of people. He meets with tons of people, and he makes promises to tons of people because he wants to be elected, which is not surprising. That's a normal thing in any other situation. You're like, oh, right, this person's going to shake hands, and they're going to talk to different groups and try to get as many people to vote for them. I mean, not weird, but people think like, oh my gosh, he's the savior. He posted a libertarian meme today. Like, you know, so it's kind of silly. But, you know, when we get back to the economic side of things, you know, when you're talking about tariffs and what's actually going on, what's often missed out is they think that, okay, if you pass a tariff, boom, Chinese products go up. Okay, American economy is booming now. You're just buying from American manufacturers that are somehow just patiently waiting, you know, for you to come shop with them, which is, of course, silly. You know, there's a reason why that people want to buy from, you know, places outside the United States. They have comparative advantage and specialization where things are a bit cheaper. And so inherently, if you've just raised prices, well, now the next best thing is going to be more expensive, because there's going to be people who might be providing, even if, you know, it's not as much as what you might get from outside the US, but they might be there, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. And then on top of that, now you have this crazy economics distortion going on, because you have these incentives suddenly being shifted. And instead of people being able to, you know, best purchase from whoever has the best, you know, trade advantage, now you're saying, okay, well, if you want to be competitive, you got to do that here. And so now you're telling everyone, oh, you got to start building things, whether it's factories or, you know, trying to train labor force locally to do what was being done outside. Now you're trying to do that here. You're shifting all of that now into an inefficient allocation. You're taking away what could have been a savings that you would have now been richer by. You would have had more money in your pocket instead of paying more to, you know, get whatever it is that you wanted. And on top of that, it's not simply like, oh, here's a tariff and it's on this like weird, you know, I don't know, Pokemon card or something, right? It's going to be on something typically that is a raw material. It's going to affect every area of production. It's going to raise prices on all those things. It's inescapable. And unlike the income tax, which I think is often missing in the calculation, is that the income tax is a productivity tax, right? So it comes in the back end. And in fact, 40% of Americans don't even pay anything in federal income tax. It's just, you know, that level of, you know, of not paying because people just, whatever it is, deductions, or they don't make enough, they don't fall into there. But with a tariff, you can't escape that, at least as readily, because all the big manufacturers, they're going to be paying that, you know, and all the, you know, the duties and imports and stuff, and they're doing that and they're getting taxed. They're going to be participating in that. And so that's going to inherently raise prices for all people. Now, of course, you could say, okay, income tax, the regulations, if you could get rid of all those and not have everybody pay, yes. Is there some way to make tariffs net benefit better than what we have? Of course, you can always figure out some percentage and whatever, and it's a heuristic, so it's not going to be accurate. But, you know, in some extreme, right, it's going to be, okay, if you have 10,000% tariffs and a 1% income tax, you know, probably 1% income tax. But if you have 30% income tax and, oh, it's, you know, maybe 2% tariffs, okay, maybe that would be better. But people are not really in control of that, and most certainly they're not going to be getting rid of the IRS and the income tax that easily, especially since Trump doesn't have control.
Wait, Jack, are you suggesting that when people are pointing out how the state creates a problem and that they introduce a state solution to the problem, that would somehow backfire? That when they promise that like they might say that they're going to, you know, trade one tax for another tax, and we would just end up with two taxes? I mean, that sounds crazy. I don't think there's any precedent for that.
No, it's unprecedented. Never, of course. Yeah, I mean, but that's exactly a great point there, is that, you know, when it comes to these things, there's nothing wrong with wishing that the IRS would go away. I wish the IRS would go away. My gosh. I mean, that's like half of what I do on people taxation stuff. I wish for the best. I just try to ground people in reality that you can't believe in something that's very unrealistic and think, yes, that's a serious campaign promise. And then on top of that, you can't go and then start to praise things that are further economic intervention that actually take you further away from a free market. The solution there is to cut the taxes and regulations that make America less competitive, not to add one more layer of bureaucracy and government picking winners and losers.
Well, let's dive into why because there are trade imbalances, right, that people point to and say, well, this is why we need tariffs, because it's not fair how a lot of businesses will just kind of ship out of their stuff and do it overseas, and that, well, other countries have tariffs and regulations that make it hard for us to, to go do business or trade at the same rate over there. So like the tariff is I've heard people try to pitch this as, well, a tariff is kind of like just a response. It's a defense to the interventions of other countries and other governments. And ideally, if you just introduce the tariff, it would make them back off. It's like a game of chicken. It's like, okay, we're just going to drive towards each other and we're just saying that they're be the ones that stop first. Like, it's not, it's like, a real trade war, real tariff trade war hasn't been tried yet, right? This time we'll win. But that's that's the argument, right? Like, I mean, it's like I'm trying to steel man the other side, which is actually really hard because it's not well thought through. But I think that, like, what's addressed maybe like the core, like, why are there these trade imbalances? What are the better solutions that would exist beyond, like, okay, well, let's fight, people just use clumsy like metaphors, like, oh, fight fire with fire. It's like, okay, but like, let's actually look at why do we have perhaps certain trade imbalances? What policies does America have? What policies do other countries have? And what are better ways around that?
Well, I think the trade imbalance idea is itself silly. It's like if you went to go get the Lord's chicken at Chick-fil-A and you keep, going there and you get your waffle fries and you get your nuggets and, you get your delicious sauces, you get the Polynesian, and you do that month after month. And you're like, oh my gosh, Chick-fil-A, there's a trade imbalance. I keep getting all their, chicken and they keep getting my money. It's like ridiculous because you're saying, oh, okay, you're making it a problem that you actually are being benefited and they're getting money from you. And then that money is only good if they want to further trade. It's decrying people just simply trading and providing value to each other and then subjectively valuing different things at different times. There's no such thing as a trade imbalance. And when it comes to the idea that, okay, there's a certain country and they already have a tariff, well, okay, that's a bad thing on its own. And obviously that there's problems there, but you don't get to fixing that economically by adding on more protectionism and then further distorting incentives by enriching the government with more taxes, because that's where that money is going. So you're actually adding on and compounding the distortions and shifting resources inefficiently and empowering the state on top of it. So, the way to combat these things, if you're talking about, hey, how do we push back against different governments that try to do their own embargoes or sanctions or tariffs or whatever it is a free market. The response is be as free as possible, let people trade, let people provide whatever it is that they're best able to do and specialize in and compete. And that's how you win, is by actually making it easier for people to enter in, get prices lower, and then to actually have more money so you can do more with it. And then eventually, as is the case, I think in most places where if you open up trade, it just happens to inspire people to want to have more free trade because people can't help but taste the bounties of the market. And they see, wow, we're so wealthy from having all these different things around the world, and we're able to do so much more. It makes people more cultured and understanding of the bounties of freedom. And those who, start to suffer because of all the protectionism, those are the people who, really are hurt the most, right off the bat, whether it's going to be someone who is suffering in a foreign country because they can't get what they need and they're poor, or whether it's someone who's just trying to start a business in America. And all of a sudden, to get, into the business they want and to buy those tools, the prices are doubling and tripling because of tariffs and all those things affecting everything from raw materials to finished goods. So that, that's what I say to that. It's just, it's a misframing. It's a nonsensical term, and we can correctly decry any government that tries to impose restrictions or tariffs, but we don't sit there and say, okay, well, let's make that worse. Like, that makes no sense. It's like the house is burning. You're like, you know what? Let's throw some more gasoline on it and hope that extinguishes it. It's crazy.
So let me just add this level to it, because I want to try and play a little bit of a devil's advocate so that you don't get away too easy, Jack, because I know you can. No. But it's to say, sure, you may want a free market in the U.S., but on the world stage, they're not playing by the same rules as us, and you're limiting our own people from exporting their stuff, and they're going to have so many more troubles abroad that we don't have the ability or the economy to help support those people, and we're going to have this incredible imbalance in the U.S. Those people are going to go out of business. All we're going to have is foreign goods. We're going to be this service economy that doesn't create anything, and now we're lackluster, and people are dying and gnawing on squirrel bones in the streets. So what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, there's two facets to that. And first and foremost, it has to be understood that when it comes to poverty, people often forget that economics games are not just like these kind of things you think of a video game and Sims, like, oh, look, there's a tower or something, you built a fortress. Like, no, if you start to make things more expensive globally, you're talking about putting millions of people into poverty and starving. This is not something that's just like a silly game. It literally leads to people dying from malnutrition, not getting enough food, not getting the resources they need for shelter. You're talking about many people in the third world suddenly falling into death or near death because of this. So it's not something that is that simple where it's like, well, we just throw up, put our nose up and just put on more barriers and distort the market more, and then somehow everything's good. It's like, no, you're actually making it so that you're taking more money of the market to governments and then making people poorer. I mean, and that's horrible. That's literally plunging people into poverty. But then beyond that, you have the issues where if you are starting to engage in these things, there is no limit about what anybody else could do in terms of the world, whether they choose to or not, that is a government, to add on their own tariffs. I mean, they can do that on their own and continue trade wars and continue harming things back and forth, to infinity. And it definitely happens over time where one government does one thing and then they respond, and it cycles into this horrific, massive inflationary environment due to government distortion on the market. So I think that, when it comes to getting people to recognize that this isn't just simply like, oh, we're making American jobs better and stronger. It's actually saying, hey, we're actually trying to avoid putting millions of people, maybe even 1 billion people, into starvation and into poverty by playing these economic control games. And so when people are saying, well, what you're saying that this place might have factories and this place might do rubber and this place might do steel. Well, yes, you're going to have on a global economy different people around the world who, due to resources, due to geography, have advantages. Some people are going to be more privy to certain natural resources. Some are going to have better climate for certain vegetation. And that's normal. When everyone is sharing in part of that, then everyone gets the benefits of that global trade and they get that advancement. And then you have things like your phone, where you have parts made from around the world developed by millions of people. And so you're literally enriching the lives of millions of people by having this shared economy and having this shared knowledge and resourcing. So the idea that it's just, oh, you're all just service jobs and this or that is very silly. People specialize and adapt in the market. And if you're worried about, well, who might get what specializations, you really then should be looking further at what the government's doing in regulations and say to yourself, okay, is the government making it harder for other people to actually do other things like set up a factory or set up a new energy supply or source? I mean, you could just look at what the U.S. government's done with nuclear, for example, and how they've basically stymied a nuclear development, giving these 20-year waiting periods. You could look at how they stopped oil refinery development, going back to the late 70s. And then you're like, oh, okay, there really is a much deeper root issue here, and that's the government is stopping people from making America actually, great in terms of economically great again. The government is actually keeping people from being able to produce and even compete potentially on that global scale. And you might even have more manufacturing in the U.S. if the government didn't make it so, difficult for people to join in with that.
Well, isn't this like the thrust of what you're getting at is that people don't understand the failure, really the myth of the idea of central planning. I mean, it's just that the minute you start to think that, well, this is the outcome that we should have, like, well, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how markets work. Because if you have, now I'm not saying we have a perfect free market, but I think sometimes when we're looking at distortions, and then we want to respond with other distortions, it's like, well, when you start stacking these distortions, then you just create a giant mess that you can't even get yourself out of. if you see a distortion, I think what you said is actually right. It's like, well, just focus on controlling what you can control, which is trying to make things as free as possible. But the beauty of the free market, like I think most libertarians have heard of the analogy of how a pencil is made and how it's actually quite complicated. There's not just one person that makes a pencil. You have woodworkers, you have miners, you have refiners, then you have the manufacturers that assemble those materials into a finished product. And for a government to try to say, well, this is exactly how many woodworkers we need. Here's how much wood that we need to plant. And for the government to decide how much, mining need to be done, how many pencils need to be made, and what the costs of those things are going to be. It just actually breaks down. And I think people don't realize that, like, do you know that people take the political grid and they kind of make it into a meme where, like, the bottom right corner is like the ANCAP flag, and then the rest of it is just like the hammer and sickle. And it's like, okay, like maybe that's a little bit over reductionist, but it is kind of true, because the minute you invoke a little bit of like a tariff or a tax or a regulation, you're kind of saying, actually, no, like, we can't let the free market run this. We need to come in with the magic power of government, and we need to actually say, like, this is how it should be done. But I mean, I don't want to get too much into an economics lesson here, but like we understand the problem of economic calculation.
Yeah, a little late
Central.
there, Jake.
Yeah, I know.
You're like, I just want to get into that.
I started singing the Internationales. I mean, let's. Yeah.
It's important, though. I mean, just like people say that, the personal is political. Well, the personal is economic, and this, people not understanding how economics work is sort of at the foundation of a lot of the issues we have. And so it's like, if you, and the minute you introduce a government intervention, it might be scalable, right? There's bigger and smaller government interventions, but they're still government interventions, and it's still the invoking of a mythical central planner that knows better than what the market decides through just free trade and spontaneous allocation of resources.
Well, Jack, as our Libertarian Christian Institute central planner, who you gave us the idea of what will happen if Trump wins and all these tariffs. What do you think if Harris wins? What kind of economic outcome can we fear from her?
Oh, I mean, she's your typical tyrant. She's a central planner. She definitely will do everything and anything she can to control the economy and prices. She's hinted at that at every turn. So she, it makes it clear that she's just another economically ignorant. I mean, who even knows at this point? Because the way that she talks to people, it's so borderline between, like, is she really this dumb, or has she trained herself so well to never give an answer that every time it just is like, you're just like, wait, what? You didn't? That was non-responsive whatsoever.
That was 5 years ago.
I was about to say, let's all do a Kamala cackle on three. 1, 2, 3.
It's incredible. I mean, it really is. You almost take a step back and you're like, okay, is this genuine stupidity, or is this like conscious stupidity? But
so about an hour ago, I got a link to a Twitter video of her basically allegedly calling a voter, thanking them for voting, and she was like,
"Oh yeah,"
basically acting this out, and she like holds up the phone, and you notice that it's actually the camera app still.
It's really that bad. I mean, it is that. I mean, we already knew that, Biden.
I realize you get stage stuff, but sure. But
so I mean, on both ends you have different types of central planning mindsets. Trump is just an American nationalist. That's his version of it. He wants to do things from an American nationalism bent, still central planning and strong federal government. But Kamala is just in the global governance cabal. So she's more a part of that type of moving toward international government. Of course, on both ends we get screwed. So it's a very unfortunate situation, as is often the case. So
hopefully you've brushed up on your Russian. Well, thank you, Jack. I very much appreciate you answering our questions. Did you want to bring in another ghost?
Yeah. So, Jack, I appreciate you joining us here. I wanted to ask you about the tariffs. You could set all of us libertarians straight who are just a little off kilter, Matt.
I'm not off kilter. Hey, I was just playing the bad guy.
Yeah, I know.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Matthew. It's been great. It's been my pleasure, my honor.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. You're good people. Good, great people.
All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a good friend of mine, Jim Babka, who is the host of the Gracearchy podcast, and he has one of the things that I've appreciated about his take on politics is that he has 5 issues that are the most important issues of this election, and he knows them by heart. In fact, they're so easy to remember, I actually know them by heart, and I've only heard him talk about them twice. So, Jim, thanks for joining us for this election.
Yeah, boy, there's a setup. I got to deliver now.
Yeah, well, it's easy, because, I mean, I could almost do it for you, but what the thing that's kind of troubling is that you're actually right, and we all know it. As soon as you say that, as soon as you tell us what this is going to be, we're all going to be like, yeah, of course. But for some reason, it's still a problem. So what are the 5 top issues for this election?
Number 1's the debt. Number 2's the debt. Number 3's the debt. Number 4 is the fact that over the next 10 years, the budget's going to go up every single year. Nope, this election won't make any difference on that. And number 5's the debt.
Wait, what was
number 2?
Oh,
I should have warned you, Jim.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Go slower. Hold on.
Let me see if I can remember.
So why is nobody talking about this? Because it used to be sort of a thing that Republicans would talk about when Democrats were in office, and Democrats would sort of talk about when Republicans are in office.
Drunken sailors.
Why aren't they both going at it at this point? And why isn't that the fear mongering that
But not
Kamala Harris and
romantically,
Trump are doing
so,
at each other?
I think they're just trying to buy everybody's votes. It's just that simple, and they have convinced themselves that it doesn't matter. So there was so much, Robert Higgs wrote a wonderful book called Crisis in Leviathan, and he suggested that there was a ratchet effect to the growth of government. And what would happen is there would be a big crisis, and then the state would expand dramatically, and then it would contract again, not all the way back to where it was. It was like a ratchet. So it was, gradually getting bigger, but it would take advantage of crisis to do this. After the pandemic, which was clearly a crisis, and they spent a lot of money during it. They basically doubled the size of government. They didn't contract really. In fact, when Biden came into office, they basically doubled down and said, what we need to do now is really juice this economy as much as we possibly can. So, back when Obama left office, we had a $17 trillion debt, and I think we're up to 35 now. So it's basically doubled in that amount of time.
Well, it was also. It was half a.
Thank you, everyone.
It was a perfect storm, really, because it wasn't even just that the virus created the crisis, but the government response to the virus by shutting down the economy, and then so it's like you're kind of like you're limiting production and keeping people home, and then printing billions and billions of dollars. And it's like, who knew that was going to, lead to massive inflation?
We did. We did it. We said
I
it. We posted it as soon as the checks were
were
coming out. We were like, all right, guys, in a couple of years, this is gonna be a lot of inflation. Prices are gonna go up.
It's the shocked Pikachu face meme. It's just like, what?
Yes, exactly.
What?
And now apparently it's corporate greed. I guess we were wrong.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, right.
That's the kind of thing.
It's Dave McCormick's fault. That
Who?
guy. Dave McCormick.
I don't know who Dave McCormick is.
It's a senator from Pennsylvania. Well, possible senator. Anyway, Jim, back to you.
Yes. No, that's okay. It's okay. Please don't let me interrupt.
No, with our little thing going on here.
You're the real guest here, but
that's okay.
So debt on an individual level sure is terrible, and in my household I have to balance my budget. But we're talking about national governments. Debts are just kind of these things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, because either we print, we tax, or we borrow, and really, as long as our economy is doing better than the Chinese, who gives a rip?
Yeah, except we know that people actually do care, and the Trump campaign woke up late in this effort and began finally talking about the economy. The old saying, "It's the economy, stupid," and they avoided doing that. Honestly, it was kind of stunning to me that they're all during, basically from the moment that Biden dropped out, Donald Trump seemed confused. Like, wait a minute, at one point he was even attacking Joe Rogan. He didn't even know which Joe he was supposed to attack, but he wasn't clear that there was a new candidate in the race that he was supposed to go up against. And he seemed kind of bitter about the fact that contest was over.
Well,
But
Like Joe Biden's such an easy punching bag.
Yes, okay, but during this last month, they finally started talking about the economy a lot, and it's showing up in the exit polls tonight. By the way, it's the #1 issue. Voters in battleground states, in state after state, are saying that the economy is the biggest issue, and it has to do with the fact that the state has spent so much money. The inflation, that's something that people are experiencing and feeling right now, and they have been for the last few years.
Can we grow our way out of an inflationary issue, or do we need to go into people's bank accounts and start removing cash? I mean, how do we reverse that trend?
To get out of the inflation?
Correct.
Well, to get out of the inflation, the thing that you would want the most is to downsize DC. You'd want to reduce the spending that's happening right now. And I understand, Matt, you already boldly announced who you voted for, so I will boldly announce that I voted for Chase Oliver, and I did it because—
How dare you, sir?
Yes, I did it because he was actually talking about these bread and butter issues in a way that makes economic sense.
Sure. Well, whenever you're talking though about the debt, you've got a lot of people who would tacitly approve of what you're saying. But are they actually going to do anything about it?
Well, what this means is that the government's eventually going to run out of money for the programs because they're not going to not pay their debt. So it means that it's going to squeeze out the programs. It means that they're probably going to have to raise taxes. It means if they don't raise taxes, they will have to inflate, which itself is a tax. Right. So one way or the other, the bill is going to come due. And I think they'll choose the inflation route because most people don't understand what inflation is.
Is this like a frog getting boiled situation, or is it more like there's a bill come due and there's someone knocking on your door and saying pay up or this is going to crash?
I think it's hard to predict the future. For a lot of years, I talked about this idea of 1,000 points of default, where you would start to see little things breaking, checks not getting sent on time, which, by the way, they've experienced in Illinois. They've repeatedly had situations where they can't get pension checks out on time. So, maybe you start seeing these little fractures in the systems where they come up. But you can't predict the future. You have no way of knowing. It could be very cataclysmic. We could all wake up one morning and find out that everything, it's kind of like what happened in 2008, where the world seems to be going to hell. But they, at that moment, do they decide to do another bailout? And from where will they get the money? And that, this is a big mistake that they made during the pandemic, was that they decided that they were going to start giving money to everybody. And as long as money was still flowing, everybody would be fine.
Yeah.
I did have a conversation with somebody in my church who actually worked for the Social Security Administration at one time. And I said, I don't expect to receive any kind of Social Security benefits because I'm sure it's going to go out of business. And he said, well, don't you think that a politician is going to make a priority the payment of Social Security to people who are the biggest voting bloc for them? And as he was saying that, I just felt like the death of this country is just going to be people pleasing at this point. How do we reverse that type of thinking in this type of debt scenario?
Well, the math is running against us. For those of us who are not quite there to Social Security age, I happen to be 56, Gen Xers, right? The Gen Xers there's not enough of us. We're the sandwich generation between the boomers and the millennials. And I think the millennials and Gen Z may make a decision that they're not willing to pay this much in taxes. Let's be honest about what this program is. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a straight wealth transfer. The way Social Security works, there's no trust fund. The money comes in from your paycheck and it goes right out to a recipient. And that's been going on for quite some time. Now they're in the position where very shortly, the amount of money that's coming in is going to kind of go in reverse, and they will not have enough money to pay for that either, which means they're going to need to do more borrowing for that as well. So, and we're just, a couple of years away from that at this point.
Yeah. Doug?
So I anticipate they're going to be forced to do something. The problem is if they had done this. So here's a really good example of a question you asked earlier that I'm just now deciding the answer. If they had decided to do something about Social Security in, let's say, 2005, because we already knew there was a problem back then, then the effect or the pain that everybody would have had to go through would be much smaller. than waiting until the very last possible minute to deal with it, which is what they will do.
Right.
They'll deal with it at a moment that it's acutely painful. And there's just no way they're not going to cut benefits at that point. There's no way that they're not going to raise taxes, and they're going to have some kind of compromise they have to arrive at. But I don't think there's going to be any way that people who are expecting to get Social Security are going to see anywhere near what they have been promised.
That sounds like almost like an intrinsic flaw in our system of government, where these decisions are made by politicians that won't make a decision until maximum pain is felt. How do we get around that?
Bitcoin?
You know, I don't spend a lot of my time worrying about that, and I'll tell you why. I believe that our job is to be there to explain things to people when stuff goes sideways. I mean, there's people at the margins that we can reach over time, but it turns out that what we just went through kind of as an international crisis. We had our own version of that here at home. We were able to begin talking to people about what happened. One of the things that I've done in my career that I'm actually proudest of is that, there was this saying that went out in 2020 that there are no libertarians in a pandemic. And the Associated Press set out to kind of, do a piece that proved this, and they were largely successful. Most of the libertarians that responded to that, big names you might even recognize, that were asked to respond about what was being done with lockdowns and masks and all the rest of that in late March of 2020, said, hey, we need government in a state of emergency. I did not. And I held the line. And, not all of the things, because it was just one article and there were multiples of us quoted, not all the things that I said to the reporter obviously made it into the piece. But if there was no way that a governor sitting in a distant capital could know what was the best situation for every business, for every person. There's just no way that they could know what those things were. If everyone had the ability to individually organize themselves, they would have been able to figure out how to get through things, how to work together. There would have been far less social friction than what we ultimately ended up experiencing because of the state's tactics, and we would have come out the other side of it. Now people can see that. There's a lot more people that are awake to this. And there were people who were also quiet who have now started verbalizing, saying, well, I didn't, I get the shot, or, I knew that something was wrong all along, and they're speaking up now. We are there, I think, in those difficult times to tell people what's happening, why it's happening. I sometimes feel like Cassandra, right? You make the prophecy, but nobody pays attention to you.
Right.
But when it starts to change and things come back, they start to realize, wait a minute, Doug told me that, Matt told me that, Jacob told me that. Those guys seemed to know what was going on at the time. How did they know? And then new people come in and get on board with this. And I do think there are people there has been some evidence that there have been people joining the Trump coalition even who are raising some of these same issues up to a higher level, so that at least now some of these things are being discussed.
Well, and that was, you brought up who we voted for. That was a little bit of my thinking, to say that, at least in a Trump administration, you think he would at least have some people in and around him that would bring up a lot of these economic matters that he may be not thinking about. In a Kamala Harris administration, it's just
no chance.
There's no chance of that happening.
So I hear you, but I want to pose this question to Jim. And full disclosure, I also voted for Trump, which I did less of a voting for Trump and more of I'm making a calculated risk or gamble. But here's the risk, right? And this actually came up.
You just wanted Elon Musk to retweet you, Jacob.
Yes, that was my master plan. There was.
I hear it work.
Yes.
That was a weird thing to wake up to. This came up in a recent debate that I participated in on the subject of, like, could Donald Trump, could his presidency be good for liberty? And while I obviously voted in sort of like thinking, well, I'm more convinced than not, one worry I have, which I want to hear you talk about, Jim, is what if the people are hearing some of these ideas of liberty being talked about, but then Trump governs more similar to how he did in 2016, and things get worse, and then people have this negative association by, like, Trump was talking about libertarian ideas and things like that, and then things got worse, and then it's going to be the problem is once again that we didn't have enough government regulation, and because unfortunately, and I think we all know, Trump is no libertarian, but a lot of his critics will bring up the things he either purportedly did that were good, or some of the things he did that were kind of good. Like he did cut a lot of regulations, he did pass some tax cuts, but people might, point to the fact that like he did those things, and then if things get worse, like do you see any potential danger there, and how could we, if Trump ends up being the president, like how would you mitigate that? I guess would you just continue to just tell people no, Trump, what maybe he said certain things, but this isn't how he governed.
So help me out, Jacob. What is the this or the that in this case? What is the thing that I should be expecting here? Because there was a lot said there. I'm sorry.
Well,
there's a lot that Jacob said.
All right, so
let's
pick
question like I do.
Well, let's pick one thing. People, so people are associating with Trump that he's going to cut taxes, even though he's pro-tariff. But whatever, they're just associating with him that there will be a direction of governance that's going to be less taxes. But let's say Trump governs in a way like he did in 2016, where maybe he cut some taxes, but he just continues to increase spending, increase inflation. We have some major economic crisis. Now that gets blamed on Trump, and that gets associated with libertarian ideas because people hear, oh, well, Trump was, flirting with libertarian ideas, and Trump was cutting regulations and taxes.
Yeah,
I
don't think there's any way in which you can accuse Trump of flirting with libertarian ideas. The tariff is not a libertarian idea. Marginal rate, small marginal cuts in income tax, not really a libertarian idea. And libertarian at its core does involve cutting the size, scope, and power of government. Listen, if you don't, we've typically had a borrow and spend party and a tax and spend party in Washington, and frequently they flip their scripts. The problem in both of those equations is the spending. And if nothing is done about the spending, it's not a libertarian administration. Full stop.
Agreed. No, I agree with that. I think that I guess what I was asking is there a danger people will, because what you said and what Matt said was that some of the people who are in his orbit seem to be, marginally better or introducing certain libertarian or libertarian adjacent rhetoric into the mix. Mm-hmm. And I guess like the concern is like, will people mistake how he governs for libertarianism, even though we all three would know that it's not?
I would say, Jacob, that you can't control anything that at least the opposition is going to say, and they're going to grasp at anything to try and make him look bad because they just hate the guy that much. So, but Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it takes a lot to find things that he does wrong. First off, I think it's actually pretty obvious he does quite a bit wrong. I say that he's probably the best president that we've had in my lifetime. And that's because the other guys clearly do more wrong, right? It's not because, well, one of the things that he does that probably the thing that I admire the most is he's kind of pulled back the veil. Now, Biden has been competing for this. We really should be competing. We really should be understanding that we don't need a president. Like everybody should recognize like that office isn't life and death. And the fact that so many people are going to be crying tonight when the results come down, or at least, next week or next month, whenever we figure it out, depending on how it goes tonight, is really kind of a sad tale. We shouldn't actually care that much about who is in this office. It shouldn't be so existential, life and death. But, Donald Trump came in and he broke a lot of customs and roles, so it's okay if you bomb and kill innocent children abroad. It's okay if you spend us into oblivion. You're just being presidential. That's just how it goes, and that's it. And Barack Obama was able to do that office very, very well. He spoke in calmed and measured tones as he did all of this, and he wore the right suit and he hung around the right people, and it was just wonderful. But Donald Trump, came in and just kind of blew all that up. And then Joe Biden doesn't even know where he's at. And so people begin to find out, wait a minute, maybe he wasn't really in control all along. And that I actually think those are their most dramatic accomplishments as president, is that they kind of pulled the curtain back and we got to see how small the wizard really is.
It's tiny hands.
So Jim, what,
by the way, your impression is pretty good there.
Oh,
yeah, he's honed it over the years.
Yes.
I've done what I could.
Yeah. So the a lot of people are saying it's kind of cliche. We all roll our eyes. It's the most important election of our lifetime. I mean, that's kind of what we jokingly named this live stream. If this one excluded, Can you think of one in your lifetime that you might look back on in history? Because that's really the only way you can sort of say, oh, yeah, that was a really important election, and it's a good thing it went this way, or it's too bad it didn't go the other way, or whatever. Is there an election that you thought might be more important than this one in your lifetime? Even ones that you couldn't vote on. Like,
but it wasn't the presidential race year.
Okay.
It was 1994, because the Republican Party had been out of power in the U.S. House for 40 consecutive years. And with the contract with America, they won. And I was just having a conversation with a very dear friend this week about this. And I was saying that, Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker of the House of Representatives throughout the 1980s, said, all politics is local. That's a Democrat statement. All politics is local. It was about the pork you could bring back to your district. What am I doing to take care of my constituents? When that election nationalized everything and changed how everybody politics from that point forward. And immediately after that happened, after the Republicans won, Bill Clinton stood up and gave his State of the Union address in early 1995. And he said, the era of big government is over. And with this divided government of Republicans in the House and Senate and a Democrat in the White House, which is, by the way, how this tends to work out the best from a libertarian perspective, is divided government. With that combination of Republicans criticizing Democrat spending, they managed to get to what they called a balanced budget. It's kind of funny money the way that they did it, but they arrived at balance E. Yeah, balance-ish. Sure, it's in the neighborhood of balanced. In 2000, exactly, and it's hard to imagine any politician of any power in Washington suggesting a balanced budget right now.
Yeah.
But that was the state we were at by the year 2000. So I think the 1994 election actually did turn out to be the most important in my lifetime.
I remember in reading Ron Paul's book, Revolutionary Manifesto, he was talking about the size of government and how, if we went back to the Clinton era, I guess, federal budget, we would end up cutting government by, it was like 90-some%. I realize that that's partly, numerically with inflation and things like that. Would you give anything to go back to the budgets of the 90s? I mean, would that be something you'd take? Would you take a president who takes interns?
To
a balanced budget.
I have a.
I love making you laugh, Matt.
My son works with me and cares about libertarianism quite a bit too, and I tell him you really missed out in not being a part of the 1990s because everybody was feeling like everything was possible. In 2000, I worked on the Harry Brown campaign. I was press secretary, and after the campaign was over, he released a book through the Advocates for Self-Government called Liberty A to C. It was a collection of his sound bites. He was so prepared. He was ready to give these sound bites. And just used his time so effectively, so well when he was in a media setting. I bring that up because if I pull that book off the shelf right now, it seems quaint and dated. The level of hostility, the negativity, the whole world did change on September 11th, and we started back down a path. We had peace at that time. The Cold War had ended, and there was talk of a peace dividend, and there was just the stock market was booming, and there was just so much thought that anything was possible. But that all started to turn. And I think it turned really severely bad with the financial crisis in 2008. Okay. I think that a lot of the politics we're experiencing at this hour happened as a result of that event. So people missed out on the 90s.
Yeah.
You like the 90s, but the 90s also gave birth to boy bands. I mean, come on.
That's actually a sign of a prosperous society. That's one of the... No, really, it is.
Oh, boy.
Jim, what kind of I want to ask you, what predictions do you have if Kamala wins, and what prediction do you have if Trump wins? And I'm not going to let you say the debt's going to go up because that's kind of, we know that.
Yeah, no, it's going to go up regardless of which one of them is in office.
Yeah. So do you have any predictions that are specific to, Kamala is bad in this particular way, and it's going to be bad for America because of this, and same for Trump?
So my number one concern with the Kamala presidency, the thing that scares me, frankly, is that the Democrats engaged in very rampant, coordinated censorship. They intimidated social media companies and took away our ability to communicate honestly, openly, and to allow kind of the dynamic that is, that our founding fathers described in the Federalist Papers, Federalist 10, that, the solution to faction was more faction. Everybody needed to speak up. That was the way it was supposed to go. The First Amendment is under severe attack. And just in the last 2 months, we've had both Senator John Kerry or whatever his station is now, and Hillary Clinton, both former Democratic nominees, both people who served in the cabinet, both people who have served in the Senate, suggesting that that we can't have free speech anymore. It's a real danger. We've got to do something. They actually perceive it to be a threat. Yeah. So I think that's the thing that scares or bothers me the most, potentially. Most of the other stuff is just normal par for the course stuff. I think that's the thing that's the most serious.
All right, how does Trump scare you then?
I do not like the idea of a mass deportation program. I think that when something like that happens, civil liberties are going to start to happen. I'm not really a big fan of the wall. The idea of, the wall, when it's finally built, will be to keep us in more than it will end up being to keep us out. That's just the way the state runs. I mean, they try to get more and more and more power. And if you're honest about what their business is milking cows and shearing sheep and taking animals to slaughter, and we are those animals. And so,
well, are you suggesting the government would ever lock people, keep them from traveling, or lock them in their homes or something? I mean, I can't imagine that happening.
And Jacob, it's already begun. Like, people who travel internationally tell me repeatedly that the coming back into the United States is the worst. The RTSA is much, much more difficult to deal with than almost every other security agency in any other airport in the world. So I think we assume that because we're the United States of America, everything's just going to be just fine. And I think that's a faulty assumption to make when you have politicians getting power. And then, it's not just Democrats. I mean, after 9/11, I was involved in running an organization called Downsize DC through much of the 2000s. And it was George W. Bush, and they were cracking down everywhere they could. They were expanding the state and encroaching on civil liberties in any way they could. They were torturing, they were surveilling, they were lying about surveilling. I mean, this is the regime. A lot of these programs, the Department of Homeland Security was created during a Republican administration. So it just depends on what the threat is, how you'll see them go about violating it. And I think Republicans are prone to think, well, law and order matters more than these pansy civil liberty issues.
Jim, I had one question for you before we let you go. You worked with Harry Browne, and you've brought up 9/11 a couple times. Harry Browne wrote
because I'm
what old. I think is I love Harry Browne. Harry Browne wrote the day after September 11th, on September 12th. He wrote this amazing piece, "When Will We Learn?" And it was, basically what a lot of people my age heard first from guys like Ron Paul about how the reason we have all these, terror wars is because of American interventionism in the 80s and 90s, really before that even. We were doing coups in Iran back in the 50s. I don't think we've learned yet, but do you think maybe when you look at, for all the flaws that you might see on the right, it does seem like you see more people being like, yeah, I don't think we should be the world's police force. And yeah, these terror wars didn't really work out, and they were kind of sold on some lies. And, Trump is not a libertarian, and he's not anti-war, but he pretends to be, and that's why people want to support him. So I don't know, maybe we haven't learned yet, but do you think that people are learning?
Can pretend to learn?
Well,
I'm
are
totally
people...
against war. Let me just say, war is bad for business. Listen.
It's like I told Jack. We get so little. We have to take the tiny little victories where we get them, right? So, if the right's waking up to be at least 10% anti-war, I mean, that's better than what I grew up with. So, what do you think? Do you think that they're learning it all, or are people starting to become a little bit less gung ho with military interventionism abroad?
Yes, I think they are learning. And I think, by the way, it was really interesting. It was potentially a mistake on the Harris campaign's part to start touring with Loser Liz. She is the epitome of the warfare state. And their party has some real issues. In fact, I was surprised they were willing to risk going after these Republican votes and pushing their own coalition away in states like Michigan. But I do think more people are talking about this and understanding this. Donald Trump did make a mistake in Syria the first year of his term. He seemed to have learned from it. He didn't keep repeating that mistake. There was a moment in which his advisors had convinced him that they needed to attack Iran, and he turned the planes around and sent them back. So I think he's aware that the very same people who are behind these actions are the ones that basically came after him, starting with the Hunter Biden laptop story, but continuing right up into the present. It's that same deep state military industrial establishment. And I don't think he's going to cotton to them in quite the same way that he did before. But more importantly, to answer your question, people, I think, are talking about this issue. They do understand it. There's widespread recognition, for example, that the war in Iraq was based on lies. There's widespread recognition that the war in Afghanistan went on far longer than we had been promised. There's a host of these kinds of questions people have recognized, and it's come home to affect their families right where they live. They've watched young people die. We had a family that we knew at the time whose son was killed over in Afghanistan. It's a horrible, horrible thing to see a life taken away before it really even has a chance to begin to fulfill its promise. And I think a lot of people understand that they were lied to, and the lies have continued. I mean, it's not just this. There's lie after lie after lie after lie that we've been told. Edward Snowden exposed lies. We now know that there was a lab leak. I mean, there's just enough things out there that people are aware of. So the next time they try to run us into war, because most of them have been started based on some kind of lie, even a false flags in some cases. The next time they try to run us, I think there is going to be a little bit more resistance to it than there ever has been before. Maybe the ratchet's working in our favor in this case.
You actually had Donald Trump, to give him a little bit of kudos, use an argument that libertarians have been using for a long time, is to say, well, let's take Liz Cheney, give her a rifle, and put her in front of people willing to shoot back at her, which the media then said...
That's an old hippie argument, by the way.
It's an old hippie argument, yeah.
Yep.
And then the media tried to turn that around and say Donald Trump wants to murder Liz Cheney, which I said, okay.
Okay, Matthew. All right.
Okay.
No, so I don't want to murder anybody. No.
Yes.
No.
So,
but really, it seems that the right again is using, like you said, these hippie arguments that seem to go out of fashion, but now they're back.
They're back. And I think that more and more people are, and I do think there is some degree to where this has come back to the right. By the way, when my dad, when I was a kid, he used to say that Democrats start wars and Republicans finish them. You can tell I came from a Republican household. That was my upbringing. So I think this is this is kind of coming back to maybe what was kind of a more traditional Republican view anyway. Yeah. So maybe in the realignment of things, that's one of the issues that's helping realign stuff.
Good.
Awesome. Jim, I appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
Yes.
I'll probably be shooting you an invite to come on my show sometime soon after the election. So
okay,
look for that.
I would love that.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. I do have one more question, Jim, just because of the last name. Cinnamon or chocolate?
Chocolate, but I love them both.
Okay, all right, just making sure. All right, thank you, sir.
Jim.
Thank you,
Jim Babka, everyone.
You can't beat a Babka. Don't forget that.
All right, we got.
Oh wait, hold on.
Oh,
let me get this up.
Is it Norman's time?
Oh, maybe.
Because if it is, I gotta go.
If it's why?
Well, because it's 8:15. So.
Oh, I see.
And also Norman Horn. I mean, need I say more?
Yeah, right. Okay, well. Oh my gosh. So here's what's gonna happen, so that Matt can read. Can read. What's wrong with me?
Can you
leave?
leave?
Can you leave? Or are you really actually gonna leave?
I need to.
Okay. So Matt's gonna leave. I'm gonna have Jacob and Norman, and I got Cody on here. I'm gonna let them lead for just a couple of minutes while I reset this scenario, so it doesn't look like I'm lonely. And
so lonely.
All right. Well, then we're gonna give Doug and Matthew the stinky boot. There they go. We're gonna bring.
There they go.
And then we're gonna bring Cody back up here. I'm gonna put myself in the center because I'm very egotistical. How are you guys doing tonight?
Fantastic, Jacob. It's good to see you, buddy.
Ah, great.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, even though I'm the worst special guest of all time. I'm like if Burt Reynolds canceled on Carson, so Charles Nelson Riley came on instead.
You just did you mean Turd Ferguson or Burt Reynolds? What's the
funny name?
No, funny. That's a funny name. He's got a funny hat. He'd be a great president too.
How's it going, guys?
Pretty good.
Deep cut.
We're starting to get some election results. We can maybe talk about our way too early predictions, maybe based on what's going on. Right now it says Harris is at 35 electoral votes and Trump is at 95.
That's not atypical though, right? Like the usual first reporting in is like, you have the states on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's like all
you got Florida. And
we got
so
Florida's
on.
reporting as being for Trump, Alabama, Mississippi,
Georgia,
Kentucky, Tennessee.
It looks like
Georgia hasn't been decided yet, but it does look like it's going to be. I mean, it's like it's like 55% Trump and only 43 Harris. So
what's the reporting percent?
42%. So there's still time to go there, but Pennsylvania, where me and Doug are at, that's only 7% reporting, but Kamala's got a 74% lead. So if I'm going to never let Doug live it down. If
when are we going to talk about the Sharpies? Yeah.
Oh gosh, the Sharpies. Anyone in the comments, especially if you follow me on X, like, did you see the whole Sharpie controversy? Because I posted on X this morning, this like thoughtful post about like who I voted for, why I voted for them, and at the end of the day, why my hope is in Christ and politics is just like a small part of our lives. And then it was just like everyone was like, "You used a Sharpie on your ballot."
Somebody's got to find outrage.
Well, people are like reposting it. People are like tagging my post onto like huge accounts and being like, "You need to break this story. They're trying to steal the election because they're handing out Sharpies to the voters."
Oh yes,
yeah. Yes. Which I was like, first of all, it doesn't make much sense because the county I live in is like actually probably like 50-50. But it very well could go to Harris. So like if I'm like, and like they're handing out to everyone. It's not like they're selectively like, a pile of pens and a pile of markers, and they're like, you get a marker. You get right. Everyone's
get a dry erase.
Yeah. Cody would get some kind of like a like a rock that you have to like try to get color off, like when you're like like when they teach you how you can get different colors from rocks and stuff. It's like, so you're like flaking the rock, trying to make a little bit of debris you can smudge onto the paper there.
So I was gonna real quick, guys. I hate to interrupt, but I actually have a scoop that just came in. I have a friend who just texted me that Britt Hume just crapped himself on live TV, and he sent me a video clip.
You're hearing it here first, folks.
There's an audible
hold on
fart noise. He sent me live video.
Oh no!
So,
can you send the video clip to me? We can play it live on air.
Okay, hold on. I'll do that. Actually,
we are not beneath these.
I can play the sound right now. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Again.
What are you looking at? Well, I've been keeping an eye on this issue that was raised in our voter analysis. It said that only half of our democracy.
So anyway.
Oh well, yeah. So just a normal day at the office. Oh my gosh!
Wow. This election, see, this whole election cycle is why I started saying that the simulation is broken, and like they really need to reset it, bring in some software patches. I mean, it's like it's no longer believable.
Yeah, I was thinking that my simulation was broken a few days ago, and then I got completely confirmed by that notion when a certain squirrel got assaulted by the state of New York, and that was it's like what? Okay, what reality are we living in now?
So you guys just entered, so we took a moment of silence for Peanut at the beginning of the stream,
and Fred. You can't forget Fred. Like Fred seems to be the oft forgotten raccoon. Come on, guys.
Listen, Fred, Peanut, and Harambe are all up in heaven, looking down upon us, praying for a Donald Trump victory to bring God's vengeance down on those which have judged unharshly.
Oh no! What a mess.
It's kind of fascinating, kind of like on my social media feed, because it seems like every other day Trumpers are either like having like what seems like a libertarian conniption, like over like the squirrel or something like that, and then like 2 days later it's like a completely authoritarian conniption over like immigration or something. And it's like there's just like sometimes they sound like
can't decide.
Yeah.
Which do you want? Do you want a strong man, or do you want freedom? Like, what is it? And
kind of got to pick one.
Yeah.
Well, so there was something that Jim brought up, and I partly want to have Jim on my show to talk about this because it's actually really complicated because I don't know what the answer is, because I understand what he said. He described it beautifully. And he was correct that we have a choice between. Sorry, this wasn't. I think Jack said it, but then Jim said something similar, where it's like we have a choice between, like a sort of like globalist nationalist central planner, and then one that's more of like a more typical like nationalist one, and like that's kind of true. Like this is sort of like we don't have libertarianism on the ballot, but what we have is sort of like nationalism versus a more globalism sort of thing. And I don't know. I guess I kind of lean towards thinking nationalism's better, but that doesn't mean it's good, and that doesn't mean that like then it's like I mean, after my Elon retweet, you won't believe how many comments I got. I mean, you actually would believe how many comments I got where it's like, yeah, that's awesome, we're going to save the country. I was like, no, we're not. No, we're, like this is at best like applying the brakes while we're already like 10 feet away from the edge of the cliff going 500 miles per hour. I mean, it's a Hail Mary. It's not a, it might be like the first step of like 100-step plan of libertarians playing 4D chess to maybe kind of save the country.
I think it's like kind of just a false dichotomy. It's like, it's either, well, okay, if you're doing this one way, that's saving the country, but like at what cost? Like, I think that, Jim kind of has it right when it's like, what are the 5 important issues? Debt. Oh, and by the way, soaring, expenses and the way in which it's going to keep calling due. And oh, by the way, debt, like, why are we debating? Why is it not being talked about that? Like the difference between our candidates in this regard for major parties are simply like, am I going to add $4 trillion to the federal budget? Or am I going to add $8 trillion?
Well, he's not wrong, but because he's not wrong,
national debt.
But because he's not wrong, I've just given up on it. It's like no one cares about the debt. Just got to fight other issues. Like it's just no one is going to do anything about the debt. Then
start playing the 5D chess and get out of it. Like that's why we do what we do. Is we're on the 5D chess realm here. Like we're looking at something that is something very different. That politics is downstream of culture, so we're going to start changing our own minds, then changing the people's minds around us, and that's going to ultimately have some type of generational effect where we're not going to have that victory, and we're not even going to slow its descent through the voting system. I'm sorry, like that's just the reality. But what we can do is begin to affect things in the long run. That's what we're all about.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
Election night for like a libertarian is like, it's like your doctor telling you that you have some kind of terminal cancer and you'll have to wait all night to find out which one it is. But we're live streaming. It's a terminal cancer diagnosis, basically.
Well, we're suckers for punishment. It basically is what it is.
Well, I think I actually tend to agree with what you're saying. I guess I just kind of look at it as which scenario is better for me to have the time to do that planting of seeds into the culture and to sort of, build, because I believe the long-term solution isn't going to come from Washington, D.C. It's going to come from, people kind of rebuilding in their own communities and, kind of building counter institutions culturally and economically. You know, and we should always be, you know, like Isaiah's job was to find the remnant, and I think it's what
figure out where the remnant is.
Yeah, it's what we're always trying to do. But it's like, well, okay, when we find them, what are we going to do with them? And in the meantime, like, how can we make sure we find as many as possible to do what we're going to do?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be able to persuade people that neither one of these options is actually getting us significantly closer to a better world. Like, you know, you may say, well, this time around, maybe I feel a little bit better. I'm going to sort of strategically vote or whatever in this direction, which of course is your right to do so if you feel that that's the right approach. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, like you said, we have to say, no, this isn't going to save the country.
Yeah, and I can respect that. You know, we're going to have differing opinions as to, you know, which candidate might end up with a slightly different angle of betterness in various, you know, very marginal capacities or whatnot. We can have that nuanced argument, but like the outcome is not one that we can realistically affect. Okay, so like there's not a whole lot to be done by that other than,
well, if you're
I'll cede the floor to you in a sec. But there's not much we can do other than, you know, react to the conditions around us in order to keep constituting a better life for ourselves individually, our families, our churches, our communities, and so on. Like we have to work within the constraints that end up getting passed on to us. We can affect that a little bit from a political level, but like that's not really our focal point.
Well, so I'm going to use this as a perfect segue to bring Doug back in, because I'll come back around the same time as I think our future guest, Angela McArdle, chair of the Libertarian Party, will be coming on. So I'll probably be back for that. And she'll be able to actually talk about this a little bit more, because she's convinced, as I'm partly convinced, that these aren't, you know, I don't think even you're saying, they're not mutually exclusive goals. We can kind of do the little things we can on the margins in the short term while always being invested in the kind of long-term local ground up stuff. So that'll be interesting to talk about. But I want to take a quick break because I've been going for an hour and a half nonstop. Yeah, sure. And Doug's going to come up and tap in. So
put me in.
There you go.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Good. Sorry. This is I had to set the mic up a little differently. All right, I don't know what you guys were talking about while I was gone, but if it was about me. Oh, I heard that part.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the part where I put my headphones on to be like, "What are you guys talking about?" And I was like, "Wait, Brit Hume, what?"
We weren't going to let that one fly.
I'm glad this is
because he sure didn't.
Actually, there was another big scoop that we missed, Doug, while you were gone. That Chase Oliver actually has swept the popular vote, but Republican and Democrat Party officials have been eating all the ballots.
Oh.
So time to stop the steal. I think we need to get involved in this.
Trump mistook it for a McDonald's wrapper. Okay, got it. All right. Okay.
Oh my goodness. So Norm, I had a question for you, and I was going to pose this to you privately, but I think we could talk about this publicly.
Oh no.
This is a one of your more popular articles from way back in the day on libertarianchristians.com. Was it all started with Woodrow Wilson?
Oh, yeah.
And so what I find...
Are you sure I wrote that?
Didn't you?
Might have to look
all right,
back.
Cody, look it up. Yeah. Woodrow Wilson on our website while I'm asking him. Well, I think you did, or you were parroting an argument that was being made that Woodrow Wilson, had Woodrow Wilson not been as involved as he was in League of Nations and punishing Germany, then you wouldn't have had the Weimar Republic, you wouldn't have had Hitler, you wouldn't have World War II. That sort of
like the sort of thing I'd write.
Everything goes back to Woodrow Wilson?
Yes.
2013. Yeah, that was Norm.
Oh,
okay. Does it say anything about this is a guest post by? Because that was how we did it back then.
Oh, let me check. Maybe that was the no, it just says Dr. Norman Horn.
Yeah, okay. All right. So
okay, well, let's see what I wrote.
So you wrote that, and I've been recently thinking, we talk about all of the ills of our current trajectory that we have. Do you think that the Norman Horn of like 2110 or something like that, 2113, 100 years from now, would look back and say it all started with George W. Bush?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
Because honestly, we don't, like, Matt Taibbi brought this up when we were at Rescue the Republic, and he was just like, this really all goes back to the Patriot Act.
There's so much that does. I mean, you look at like the inflection points of spending and whatnot, and you mentioned earlier that if we went back to like a Bill Clinton era budget, it would be a tremendous reduction in overall size and scope of government. And you're not the first who's observed that, obviously. I mean, I remember Anthony Gregory said that before. He's a good buddy of mine. We've talked about that for years. I mean, like these are great observations and really, and kind of astute for kind of seeing where did we kind of see these turns? What were the biggest levers that kind of made the impact that like has sent us on new types of trajectories? And I do think that in some sense, you're right. It does kind of go back to George W. Bush. And it's mind blowing to me. Like when I think back to the way that I used to think, like I remember very distinctly, where I was on 9/11 and all that, being in college and so on, and observing, then the response to that. I remember, the first strikes against Afghanistan and so on, and how that was televised, and I remember all that stuff very, very distinctly. And that's, the fact that so many of us were just like, it didn't compute to me that this was a bad idea at the time. And it took getting woken up by a variety of different, different angular sources, if you will, coming from different angles, to kind of make, you got to put 2 and 2 together and make and see that. I think it's very possible that we're going to look back and continue to look back on things like the Patriot Act, which never gets repealed. It always gets, renewed. It always gets a bigger budget. It always goes bigger, and it never stops. That brought in the Department of Homeland Security. That brought in ultimately, I mean, all this stuff ends up bringing in the TSA and all these, the increased power of the FBI and the CIA and the domestic spying programs. It's where we wouldn't have to be having discussions or arguments about torture because we wouldn't have Guantanamo acting in the same way. We wouldn't have to be like there was a what was the article? It was like, I think on Reason recently. Maybe it wasn't Reason, maybe it was somewhere else, but Reason has stuff like that. But there are kids being, coming of age right now who have never known a United States that has not been at war. And despite, Donald Trump's, like rhetoric in like, oh, well, maybe he didn't start any new wars, but you know what he didn't do? He also didn't end them. And this is what really pisses me off.
Didn't he set up the plan for leaving Afghanistan? Because didn't he be like, yeah, I had it all set up and Joe Biden botched it?
You could sort of make that argument on some level, but like, come on, like, do you think Ron Paul would have waited until the end of his first term to get out of there?
Yeah.
The answer to that is no.
Was the busload of kids in Yemen that got blown up, was that under? I don't know if that was under Obama, Trump, or Biden at this point.
Oh, and they're all the same.
It's pretty much
all the same. Only
and that's
the
I think what's kind of
changed.
I'd kind of hoped that like when Trump became president, he would. Because you ever like watch a movie that's like kind of like a satire or whatever, you have like this sort of big bombastic character that kind of shows like how ridiculous like a certain system is or whatever. I'd kind of hope that Trump would be like that we'd sort of all go, man, this whole system is just insane. Why are we doing this? But it almost had the opposite effect. Like a lot of people sort of went back and said, who I really miss? I miss the Bushes and the Cheneys, and it's like, those people started 2 fake wars. They started these spying programs on the United States citizens. They supported torture. And it's like, you wish that we had those guys back because they don't talk like sub morons. Like that's really not like, anyway, it had like pretty much the opposite effect. It made those people look better somehow because I think they just had, they were more, I don't know, polished.
You're dead on. I mean, I think you're exactly right. The corollary to that perhaps is to suggest that maybe the biggest benefit that we've had from, Trump's presence throughout this whole process has been disabusing us of the notion that the media has anything positive to say and in any way has a capacity for prevailing truth in our society. They're unreliable nitwits. I mean, come on. Like, I think we're getting to the point where I think there's so many signs that their power is being broken. I mean, due to even just thinking about like the way in which Joe Rogan could basically, deny the sitting vice president her whim to make him go to her for an interview, and things like that. And this is news because it's like, yeah, we kind of understand why. Like, and it's not like nobody slapped, like the rebuttal or the crackback is not to stab like Joe Rogan a bunch and say like, yeah, I mean, how dare you, I mean, yes, there's some people saying that, but I mean, that's not the case.
Yeah, well, to me, it's about the same as when Twitter blocked Donald Trump. I mean, you have the right to do that. I love that personally. I was like, this is great. We have a private corporation that's telling the president of the United States to shut the hell up.
Yeah.
But the other side of that though is like, do you feel like worried in sense or like anxious about the fact that sort of these institutions that sort of had these, historically or at least theoretically, at when we sort of think about it optimistically and valorize them a little bit, you have these sort of checks and balances, you have this sort of pursuit of truth, you have fact checking and stuff like that. Is it a shame in a sense that we have lost these institutions like the media, and so now it's like a tweet is kind of considered as like valid as Walter Cronkite? Like, I mean, is that because to me, like that's there carries some negative things with it too.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose confidence in these kinds of like institutions, like we even have this in our core values, by the way. We value strong social institutions, of which the media could theoretically be part of that. Okay, they could be, but they're not. Why? Because they're so clearly entrenched in power and drinking that Kool-Aid of being, of the being of that kind of elite frame of society, that they are not interested in truth telling, not nearly as what they should be. And so, yeah, it is unfortunate. We are relegated to trying to figure this out differently now. That's not, and so is it unfortunate? Yeah, but it's also like, at least we're figuring out that what we've had for so long has been total dupedness. Like, I mean, we've been duped for so long and we're figuring it out, and we're exiting that. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I hope that we eventually find a better place to land on, because I guess I'm not totally confident that Elon Musk being an arbitrator of truth is significantly better. Right?
Yeah, but clearly he's not though. Like, I mean, there are enough. The part of the beauty of this whole free, like, kind of the free speech element of this is that Elon gets fact checked too. It's not like I mean, people are going to believe Elon and when he says something stupid sometimes, and he has said some stupid stuff. Yeah, but there's like, on the other hand, you could just have, CNN parroting whatever is the administration line, which is a total lie, and it's getting propagated to, cajillions of other people in a way that is completely unhealthy and probably worse. So, which is like on the margins, like, do I want a more truthful situation, period? Yes. Which would I rather have? Probably the Elon situation, where we have a whole lot of free speech advocates and independent people who are fact checking that are actually like, we can now figure this out. We can triangulate around truth better.
Jonathan Rauch calls that the constitution of knowledge, where basically we come to the truth as a not come to the truth in like an epistemological sense, but like we can arrive at those things through crowdsourcing and all contributing to, hey, here's how you're wrong, or here's how you're mostly right but wrong in this one way, and we kind of refine one another as a society. I just finished reading his new. I think it was like 2 years old. The Constitution of Knowledge. It was really a really great book about free speech on the one hand, but also just how do we arrive at knowledge and what threatens those kinds of things when people begin to say, well, that's not a proved opinion. That's a power move. That's not a democratic move, and it's also not part of the Constitution of Knowledge that our founders set up.
Yeah,
I'll give you an analogy too. That is just like. I hesitate sometimes to put forward analogies like this because it can kind of get reductionist on some level, and I don't like it always. So I'm gonna put this out there with a grain of salt. All right, but imagine you're going, keep moving me around.
I thought it was gonna do it this way, but I clicked the one button, but it didn't. So
you go to we go to church on a weekly basis. We hear a minister hopefully proclaiming the good word of God on a weekly basis. And we trust that. We trust that this minister is indeed giving us information or teaching us in a net positive way, that they are presenting us with the truth of the word of God and in a truthful manner. Okay. The moment that you begin to suspect that this person is, perhaps taking some liberties in a bad way with the scripture, we begin to start gaining suspicion, and we begin to, potentially distance ourselves from adhering to those teachings so much. And what do you do when you kind of realize that not only is this person like occasionally wrong, they're persistently and consistently wrong? Well, then you're going to go find a different church, or you're going to find other people to go and learn from and be with. That is where I think we're kind of at with the media on some level, is that we trusted them as an institution because historically they were supposed to be providing us with facts, with an understanding of what is going on in the world. But if we cannot trust that, then what should we be doing? Finding a different way to go. If we were with a pastor or a minister, we would find a different church.
Yeah,
and kind of thing.
I think in theory, I like all of that. I think I wish I felt like I had more confidence about, because I think there are some kind of alternative media organizations that are stepping up that have been fairly trustworthy, that have, I think, managed the discourse pretty well. Free Press shows up as an example. I think Reason's done a really good job. I think one concern that I have, though, is it's like, instead of having like 3 or 4 sort of thoughtful sort of narratives that were sort of allowed, that in that sort of, what do you call that? The index card of opinion or whatever. And
3x5 card of allowable opinion.
Yeah. There you go. Now you have like sort of thousands of narratives that you have to sort of pick from, and they all sort of seem equally valid, especially if you're not like a particularly sort of thoughtful or educated person. And so it's like, I think like on one hand, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I think if we lived our lives fairly locally, I don't think it would matter that much. But I think it does matter a little bit when we're talking. Our decisions are kind of like nationalized.
You're on the right track though, because think about it. Like if it were not the case that we had so much power concentrated at the top, where it flows down and affects our lives in that particular way, then like this wouldn't matter so much. Like you wouldn't need to like. I've had my mother-in-law, for instance, bless her, she's wonderful, but she should not have to have an opinion on all of these things.
Right.
She should be able to live her life without the constant interruption of the federal government proffering an opinion and making us have to start revisiting the way in which we're interacting with each other. Like this is not a way of ordering a society. Madness. This is madness. This is not even Sparta. This is worse. And it's just, this is where, like, on some level, a great argument for the anarcho-capitalist ideal is that, the bulk of our interactions that we have on a daily basis are anarchical in nature. We don't need to have this level of control over us. We don't operate as if it exists most of the time. What we're just trying to suggest is that model actually does work in a lot of other scenarios in which you don't currently believe that it does. And we shouldn't have to have this sort of overwhelming force among us in order to have order. And in fact, it's exactly the opposite. When we build a society that has at its core that the greatest power has a monopoly of force and the ability to enact it in the way that it pleases itself, then what we have done is constructed a society in which we have no expectation of peaceful interactions amongst each other.
Well, and I think it kind of, in a weird way, it kind of goes back to Hayek's knowledge problem, right? So if we have to elect somebody to be the president of the United States and everything that goes with that, we need to be able to, I think, take into consideration so many different factors and so many details. And so then at the end of the day, like, we don't have the time to research that kind of stuff. So we go, Trump, right? Like, so yeah, I think that's a good point, that if you take away, how momentous those decisions have to be, it doesn't necessarily matter, that we don't necessarily have to fight for the right narrative of the thousands of narratives that there are.
I just want to fight for my right to party.
There we go.
Sorry. Thanks.
Speaking of parties, Cody and I have been hosting a party every month at LCI, and we've been reading a book. Sorry to disappoint you. It's not a real party, but we have a lot of fun.
It's not like a Diddy party. We're actually reading.
Easy now.
Yeah.
Wow.
It really isn't. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not like that. So,
it is all men though. Sorry, go ahead. Generally. It's not exclusive to men, but
Cody, I'm going to mute your mic so I can continue.
You just keep digging, digging.
Just keep digging. I know that's a misquote of Dory in Finding Nemo. We just did a book club. I don't have the book on within reach, so I could show it. But we just did a book club on called "Electing Not to Vote." It was a bunch of essays on why it might be okay to not vote. Since this is election day, and I think the polls are closing in some states, or have already closed in some states. Not everybody chooses to vote, and that's okay. And for those Christians out there who might have decided, you know what, I'm not going to vote, you don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel guilty by actually voting either. I mean, maybe you should feel guilty for voting for certain people. We'll find out. But Cody, what has been what was your biggest takeaway on that book with respect to not voting? I mean, I don't think it was there to change your mind, because I think you already there.
I was going to say I've got it on Kindle, but I don't have the paperback. It was a really great book. It's been great discussion. Most of the perspectives, I think, kind of come from within Anabaptism, which sort of makes sense. But there's other perspectives included as well. And so it's a series of articles. And, I don't necessarily want to do commercial for the book because we're already out of the book club. But we've got other ones coming up, though. The discussion, I think, was really great. We generally have, I think, really good discussions and good people that show up in these discussions. One thing that was kind of funny is, as we were reading it, I was kind of encouraged to post different stuff online, sort of telling Christians they don't have to vote. And so then that sort of upset kind of one group of my friends. And then recently, some of the kind of super devout Christian anarchists sort of came at me for me saying I think I actually will vote for Chase Oliver though. And so it's then I'm sort of having to sort of arbitrate, listen, you have a right to not vote if your conscience tells you don't have to. That's totally fine. But the Bible actually doesn't say thou shalt not vote. There's a little bit of gray room here, a gray area here for how we want to approach these things. And so I think one thing that this particular book did was, I think, give me kind of a thoughtful argument for why somebody might come to the conclusion that they don't feel good as a follower of Christ for voting. And there's different reasons that are given for why. And like I said, they come from different perspectives. But yeah, at the end of the day, my opinion is, if you feel that you're encouraging violence through your vote, or if you feel that it is in any way compromising your allegiance to Christ, then don't vote. But like me a couple of years ago, I live in Ohio. I voted for an amendment that would get the Ohio government off of the backs of my neighbors who smoke marijuana. And I'm not a marijuana user, but I felt it's kind of a no-brainer for me to vote against state violence and get these people off my neighbors' backs. Yeah. So I did it. I don't have any regrets about that. But but there are other things that I wouldn't feel great about voting for. And so I like that this book sort of gave some vocabulary and some arguments for how we might approach those issues and when we might decide it's not the right thing to do.
Another thing is nice to appreciate about the book was it differentiated between the presidential election and other local and even governor elections, and that a Christian might choose to abstain from, say, voting for either Trump or Harris. And this book was written 14 years ago, so it was Bush and Kerry at the time.
Wow, it's so prescient.
Yeah, it was. But could also say, you know what? But there's some important things locally, like for example, what Cody just suggested. And that you can vote in that, and you don't have to fill out every option on the ballot, right? You could just say, you know what, I'm going to vote for this, and I'm going to ignore the president part because of whatever reasons. And so it gave verbiage to that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So these book clubs at LCI have been a lot of fun. It's been very enlightening. It's also a little bit of effort in the sense of hey, there's some discipline to it. I mean, Cody and I have been reading a book that's quote unquote assigned. I mean, it's self-assigned because we're the ones choosing this and all of that. But we've had to commit to it because we're leading it, and so it's been a good practice. So I put a link in the chat. I hope everybody can see it. It's just libertarianchristians.com/events. The next book club that's even open is actually not until February. Cody's going to lead it. And then there's one in March. So we're taking a little break over the holidays. There's actually one starting this week, but the seats are closed up because timing. Anyway, we are looking forward to that. I want to talk about Cody. You said you didn't regret voting against or voting for eliminating whatever it was that you voted for.
Yeah.
Or voted against. You were voting against government violence. That's how you put it.
Yes.
Before Norman and you came on, Matthew was asking, I think it was Jack, was there any vote in your lifetime that you kind of regret? And I'll go to you first, Norm.
Oh gosh, a vote that I regret. Well, okay, it would be George W. Bush in 2001, or sorry, 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it you regret it now because you made a dumb
decision?
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It wasn't. It was actually. It was 2004. It was 2004 because that was before. That was still before I kind of flipped sides.
Okay. So were you like in transition?
Yeah, and more or less. I mean, at that point in 2004, yeah, I was on the pathway, but not quite there yet. I didn't understand things quite fully.
Gotcha. How about you, Cody?
Yeah. So I can think of one that I almost regretted. I think it was
today's.
Obama McCain. I struggled with it. I wasn't really a libertarian yet exactly, but I was anti-war and I was pro-life.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I guess I got to vote for one of them. But I really didn't know who to vote for. So I know. So I showed up like 15 minutes before the polls closed, and I had forgotten my wallet. And I said, "Thank you, Jesus," because I didn't have my ID with me, and I wasn't able to vote. And it was too late for me to go home and get it. So that was one vote.
So racist laws kept you from voting.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I don't know that I was the target of those laws, but sometimes.
Yeah. It's funny.
Man.
It's funny when I went to vote today. There was a they open up the thing and they're like looking at your names and you have to sign and all that. And several of them say ID required and some of them didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if it's just like the person registered more recently. And I don't know. I don't need to get into voter ID laws because I don't know enough about them to carry a conversation about them.
Oh my gosh!
Other than to make snarky remarks about racism. We've got a nice amount of people here in the on the live stream, and so those of you who may want to ask us questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Jacob asked something earlier, but I think it would have been timed based on what was being said at the time, so maybe he can bring that back up when he comes back and join us. We have some guests coming soon. We have one that's he was invited and then he had to hop off, and then he was like, hey, or he couldn't make it because of some emergency, but things were fixed. And so he's actually able to make it. He's going to be joining us here pretty soon. So that's really nice to know.
Cool.
And Jacob will be back with us in a little bit. And he has invited some special guests on to join us. So, yeah, Norm, I don't know if we want to fill in the time a little bit here while we're waiting on our next guest to talk a little bit about what's going on with LCI. I mean, it's important to share some of the stuff that we're doing.
Perhaps, but I want to actually dovetail onto something Cody said a moment ago too, which with regards to local elections and stuff. And I just found it interesting even today, for instance, that there's some real tension, I think, even in just the amount of power that even just state governments have. And we like to talk as libertarians about how we want things to not only just we want to remove power from the federal government. They need to just get out of the way. But then also, we try to say things need to be decided locally. And so to what extent does that mean? That's kind of up for debate. But in general, we say shift it to lower and lower levels. But it is interesting to note that sometimes this means that you have some really weird ballot propositions. And I was just noting today on the Missouri ballot, there was some really stupid stuff that in the way that it was framed and the way in which we were being asked to vote, for ballot measures, amendments to the Constitution of Missouri. Because I'm more familiar with the way it worked in Texas, so I was much more involved on legislative issues down when I was living in Texas. But in Missouri, at least, there are certain things that have to be elevated to constitutional amendments, and that the state legislature cannot do. In fact, sometimes the Missouri Constitution has to be amended in order to allow for the Missouri legislature to be able to legislate on the topic. And it's kind of weird like that. And I don't have all the answers there, but it was interesting to note just how many things, for instance, there are some just bizarro, things like, why are we being asked if we want to give Missouri the power to regulate sports betting and then provide for this, in order, and then of course it has to give you its fiscal, estimate as to this is going to cost of a one-time cost of $600,000, and then we'll have a first-year revenue of $725, and ongoing revenue of $1.4 million estimated over the next 10 years, in by annum or whatever. It's just, come on, like why does this have to be even in the purview of the state? Like this is absurd to begin with. And I feel like that it's kind of like, this is not even like a, let me try and reduce state violence. This is like, let's, because I'm not really pro gambling per se. I think it's a vice in a lot of instances, and we can, and so on and so forth. But like, I also don't think there needs to be certain laws like this. And the fact that we're also then being asked to provide for new regulatory structures is just nuts to me. And yet we're supposed to be informed enough as a public to really understand this is how we should be voting on this. It just seems crazy. And we have even a second ballot measure about betting and allowing for riverboats, which is kind of a thing in this stupid state. Like, I don't understand that at all either. But it's like, you can't have gambling happen on land, so they put it on boats. Okay, whatever. It's an absolute mess. And I think the point is just to note, like, this is the chaos that we live in. And going back to our previous part of the conversation is that when our lives are kind of taken over by these minutiae of the way in which that the state can enact force against others, this is actually what leads to chaos. It is not anarchism that is chaos. And it's a great argument to be able to suggest, again, most of what we do on a daily basis is anarchical in nature and doesn't have the threat of force in it. Yeah. It's the state that is inculcating this idea that force is necessary, and that's chaotic.
You mentioned the gambling initiative. I'll say something real quick. Just thought this was interesting. Yeah. In Ohio, before we kind of had a more sort of clean, clear marijuana bill or amendment, there was one a few years back that said, we will let people carry a small amount of marijuana without the police bugging them. However, in voting for this, you also have to let Nick Lachey from the boy band 98 Degrees have a monopoly on selling marijuana in this state. And I was like, that's a weird amendment. Yeah, that's 100% true.
What? That's nuts.
Oh, that's bizarre.
Okay, so but I wanted to say that real quick because I just thought it was weird. But Norm, I think Doug was asking you about different stuff LCI's got in the pipeline.
Yeah, and if what you guys, I just want to say, like, for all of our listeners here, we appreciate you hanging out with us and talking through and just having a grand old time here. If you appreciate what we're doing, I hope you'll consider supporting us before the end of the year in the form of a donation or some type of volunteering. Like, we'd love to involve people in what we do as well. We have something really exciting actually to announce tonight, and this is like just brand spanking new. It may even just be launching on the website. We've got this ready to go too. We are announcing tonight that we, kind of like last year, where we had a $12,000 matching campaign put up by our board and a few select other donors. This year, we have a even bigger $15,000 matching grant that is a challenge grant put up by our board and select individuals. We want to thank those folks for making that happen. And it's a challenge to you guys. Like, again, every dollar you basically donate is immediately doubled. This is the biggest time of the year to kind of get put kind of our war chest into being for the next year and get everything going. It's really exciting. This is how we are able to do what we do and at the level of quality that we do it. So we thank you guys for your support. We ask for it again. If you trust us to keep on, proclaiming the word of God in this particular manner, please support and help us make it happen in an even bigger and better way. I'll give you a couple of things that are really exciting, that you can look forward to in the coming year. Some of it, you can even kind of see glimpses of it in action right now. The biggest one that I can actually talk about is that one in particular. And that's that we have in the last month or so been pulling the trigger in trying to provide people who are non-English speakers with our material using various types of tools, technology, and software in order to automatically translate a lot of our written materials into other languages. And I'm telling you, this has been an incredible success already. We are seeing tremendous reach all across the world. Now, we knew that was already happening because we even had a neat little bit of information come this week. The Libertarian Christian Podcast is now being listened to in over 100 countries. Thank you guys for helping make that happen. That is because of your support that we're able to project this message that far. Well, guess what? We can do even more now with our translational efforts. And in fact, like what we're seeing is that we're like literally doubling or maybe tripling our reach into other countries just by pulling that trigger and making it happen. And so there's a lot more work to be done in that arena. We're seeing tremendous response from the Hispanic communities and from French speaking communities in particular. This is really cool. One of the top requests for translations and pages is Iran. Our brothers and sisters in Iran are asking for this material and are looking to learn. Help us help them. And if you will, make a donation before the end of the year, double it with our awesome campaign of the matching grant, make it happen. This is going to be a crazy, amazing year for us if we can continue to go on this roll, produce more, market it even better, show people what we got. And there is a better way to live in this world than to trust in the power of the state. And we're going to do it all for the glory of God, guys. This is how it works, and this is how we win. Not through the power of votes, but through the power of the Word of God.
All right. Well, speaking of donors, we have our first donor here with us. He's going to join us. Doc Dixon.
What?
This is putting him on the spot. No, I'm totally joking. That was just my awkward segue because he's been sitting in the green room here for a while. No, I'm really excited to bring Doc on. Thankfully, he was able to join us. Doc, hope everything's good at home and all is settled and handled properly.
I can tell you what happened.
Oh, go ahead.
It's we have dogs, and the dogs decided to fight each other, which dogs do sometimes. And my wonderfully brave 9-year-old tried to get between them. Huh. But he's okay, but he needed some sitting with daddy time and all that sort of stuff. He's a tough kid, so he's fine. Hey, can I do the opener we discussed before? We chatted about before, Doug?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Here we go. Get ready for this. Live from the Libertarian Christian Institute, it's the Chase Oliver Victory Party. Dun, 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 dun. All right.
If only, right?
Sorry. I had to get the joke out of my system.
I know. Yeah. I'm sorry I blew it because I didn't start it because we weren't quite ready and Jacob was and he didn't know the joke. So,
well, as long as it's been done.
Yeah.
It's guys, you crack me up.
So I've been with the family stuff tonight. What's going on in current events?
Well, we were talking about Woodrow Wilson earlier and how he ruined the world, and then George Bush ruined the world.
Yep.
So,
okay.
There was an attack on the Twin Towers a long time ago, and that's affecting world events today. That's
so the thread seems don't trust W's.
There's that. Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson, WW, and W.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something to that, I think.
So you've had a lot of very smart guests on, including Cody, but before me. I consider myself a palate cleanser.
Okay.
I just, it's.
Do you self-deprecate in your live shows?
Not as much as I do. No, it's not. It's just reality. I know what my strengths are. I'll compare myself to Norm. Norm, hard drive wise, way more than me. I got more RAM.
Oh,
because that's what I need for my living.
Okay. Okay. Doc, did you vote? I don't need to ask you who you voted for, but did you vote?
Yes, I did.
Do you feel sick to your stomach?
No, for years I've made the joke voting is a form of Stockholm syndrome.
It kind of is, yeah.
But I've come to look at it this way. I hate metaphors, analogies like this, but it's all we got. Okay. If I'm in prison and I am unjustly convicted, we're going to assume that, right? Thanks.
Yeah,
okay, good.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
sure.
And of course, thank you.
Go ahead. I don't know. I gotta keep going here. And then I'll be like,
he doesn't know me. He's just what? What?
I mean, is it for your beard or is it for something else? No.
Nice.
He doesn't know what to do with that.
So, if you had a chance to somehow maybe sway you and the other inmates, well, let's not say getting a good warden, but getting a warden that sucks incrementally less. Yeah. So that's my take on the
That's a good take, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're in Georgia, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Georgia is apparently an important state this time, or no?
Yeah. A buddy of mine.
Yeah, it's on the margin.
Well,
isn't Georgia where they do all kinds of cheating and election fraud?
I heard there was some sort of like ask for an extra 12,000 at one point votes, and something like that, right? They have like it's a contingency, like they just just open the drawer.
He didn't. I didn't ask. I didn't ask for votes to be created. I just said if there's some votes you haven't found yet, real votes, find those. I'm not an impressionist, so that's as good as it gets. But I believe that's or as I can get. I believe that's his defense.
Yeah.
Of that phone call.
But before Trump did that, it was Stacey Abrams was from Georgia too, wasn't she? So it was like apparently they were just screwing over everybody on both sides, just kind of randomly out of spite.
Say what you will, but she rebounded because I saw in the Star Trek universe he was leader of Earth.
That's just before you said that, I was like, yeah, she rebounded. And I was thinking because she was on Star Trek is what I was thinking there too.
They found some votes for her apparently too.
So Doc, we've been asking everybody: is there a vote in your lifetime that you regret?
I think it would be better asked have I done some dumb votes, but I can't really say I regret them. I can't go back in time, and I know I'm mincing words, but yeah. It's done. It's done. I've written in Ron Paul a few times.
Nice.
I accomplished my lifelong dream today and wrote in Ron Swanson.
I once had a guy who's pretty influential in the magic community. I kid you not. He calls me the Ron Swanson of magic.
Oh, that's
a high praise. That's high praise.
That's high praise.
So do you walk around? Do you walk around at magician things and stare at people and say, "I know more than you"?
I was going to say, now that Penn Jillette's not a libertarian, you can be the Penn Jillette of magic.
Ooh.
It's weird that all Penn kind of not identifying as a libertarian anymore. That kind of hit the fan as I kind of entered the libertarian universe in a larger way, the Woods 2000 and all that. And the number of people I had come up to me like, what the heck is wrong? It's like, listen, I wish he wasn't thinking that way anymore, but I wouldn't be here at that event, many other events, and we wouldn't know each other if it weren't for him.
Yeah.
And tell her. And, aside from what I disagree with him politically, I think he's still a great guy, very gracious cat, So
we can have friends who aren't libertarians, Doc. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I listened to his interview with Nick Gillespie. I think it was about 4 years ago. Maybe it was 3 years ago.
You mean that penetrating, confrontational interview from Gillespie?
Okay.
No, it was the opposite.
No, it wasn't. But
it wasn't at all.
I don't really expect that from Nick Gillespie, to be honest. But but it seemed like he had a lot of the Venn diagram between what Penn Jillette believes and where libertarians are is still pretty overlapping. It seemed to me that he had no faith in the movement and that it couldn't answer a lot of the questions that that he found lacking, that he found it wanting in certain respects, which, I mean, I can understand why that's one of the reasons why people might move on. So, yeah.
Yeah, but if I can draw a Christian metaphor, and this being LCI, I will. We're called to be in the faith good and faithful servants, not good and successful servants. Mm-hmm. We do what God wants, but it's Him that brings in the Lord that brings in the harvest.
Yeah.
So I hate to apply that same framework to political ideology, but as much as I can, I think we're more called to stick to good political thought than we are to constantly be sweating the numbers. Now, that being said, if we're doing anything that is a roadblock to that, like, okay, taxation is theft. Yeah, I get that, but that's a tough intro. For
a lot of people, it is. For some people,
to a number,
for disgruntled,
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you can, follow up with that, but why not get into it in a way that people might be more initially receptive to, and look at Ron Paul when he was running, the Giuliani moment.
To the anti-war, stupid and stuff like that. Yeah,
I have 6 sons. Makes me much more sensitive, and much more aware of anti-war.
Yeah,
just because of that, I don't want my boys being sent somewhere.
Right, exactly.
Or more accurately, I don't want someone trying to send my boys somewhere.
Yeah, and convincing them that that's like the ultimate way that they can make use of their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have, I think that's perfectly fine.
See, Doug, Norm said it was perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, and there's, but Doc, you're here's another like approaching the biblical truth with a bit of just natural law. I mean, in a sense, right? The fact is that knowledge is distributed in society, and we do not have perfect knowledge in order to make perfect decisions. And we do not know often what the outcomes of various types of policy decisions will be. And so in order to actually know what the outcomes of a variety of different policies would be, you kind of have to have, either one or two things happen. You either need to have perfect knowledge, or you need to have a principled stance as to this is how it turns out. It's like, we know that the minimum wage, for instance, is a bad idea and actually eliminates jobs in the long run rather than creates them, and so on and so forth. That's that's basic knowledge. That's basic economics, right? But the consequences of policies are far reaching, and we don't always know what it is in order to, if you enact one policy and you may have a first order effect, the second and third and fourth order effects, you're not going to necessarily be able to calculate that. And this is why we have to focus on doing the right thing rather than just trying to get victories.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what the outcomes are going to be down the line, but you can know what you ought to be doing.
I said that in the second term of President Weld.
Okay.
So. What's the thing? The word's escaping me. In an emergency, when things are you charge more for them.
Price surging?
Gouging.
Yeah,
gouging. Thank you. That just word was escaping. Yeah. I think that's something when it comes up is another one of those things that if someone will give it a listen and not just react emotionally, they can see the folly of anti-price gouging laws. Although, frankly, the hope of someone listening to a logical argument is somewhat deterred by reading the Facebook feed.
The Little House on the Prairie book, where the local vendor is price gouging or whatever, raising the prices, and everybody's complaining and they're threatening violence or whatever, and Pa sort of steps up and says, no, I mean, he has a right to charge whatever he wants to for it, but we'll remember this next time we're looking for somewhere to shop, So I think there is like something to be said about neighborliness. But did you guys ever see no, you didn't. I'm not. Maybe Doc did. The Leave It to Beaver episode where Beaver is.
I believe I just got stealth old guide right there.
That wasn't very stealth.
Well,
I saw it in reruns, but.
Well, I didn't see it I didn't assume that you saw it originally.
But he just assumed you were a slacker and watched Nick at Night.
As much as I do, yeah. So there's an episode of Leave It to Beaver where he's like going around selling water. He's got like all these.
Oh yeah, the water goes out, and Beavis. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So first he's like going around trying to sell it. Nobody wants to buy it, and then there's like a water issue where that nobody's getting water, and so he's like, all right, well, $5 for a pitcher or whatever, and everybody starts to turn on him. But I was like, I thought actually it's been kicking around my head. I'm like, I want to write an article about how Beaver Cleaver did nothing wrong, because you've got a point there for sure.
And the reality is, in an emergency, okay, if it's money to be made off coming in, say, selling generators, well, there shouldn't be a law against price gouging, nor should there be a law against someone else coming into the area with generators. And then you have two guys, and as we all know, ta-da, there's competition, and the price is going to drop.
Well, yeah, but price gouging only works when supply is low. Yeah, once supply gets high again, all the normal rules of economics go into effect. And so if their supply is low and you're charging regular price, then everything goes, you basically sell out immediately. And then just as many people don't get it, right?
But it can
make a difference.
But it can still say low relative to the normal once competition is, and then
high prices incentivize other providers to start supplying the good. That's not what is characterized as price gouging on some level is maybe a bit of a misnomer. It's responding to the demand.
It's a signal.
And so the response to high demand is then increasing the supply, which then reaches that more equilibrium price level or reestablishes the lower equilibrium price level. So that's kind of what's going on at that point. We see this in hurricane season, when suddenly bottled water is really expensive. Well, if you let people, drive down from Georgia with a truck full of bottled water so that they can sell it for, 10x the price that they paid for it, they might actually happen,
And can I just point out that I was right that Doc had seen that episode and that neither one of you guys had?
That's the subtle old guy.
That's the
not only had I seen it, oh shoot, you're taking me back decades now. It was on in reruns in the morning where I grew up in the Pittsburgh area, and regularly at lunchtime me and my buds would discuss that morning's episode. An Algonquin roundtable, if you will, much like this discussion right now. So I definitely remember that episode.
Yeah, Algonquin is exactly how you would describe this discussion on this live stream.
Speaking of weird pricing and whatnot, and the fact that we did bring up Star Trek, I think it's worth noting that Star Trek is perennially confused on these topics all the time. And it never ceases to amaze me how they can just get so blasted confused in a show that is supposed to be post-scarcity and so on and so forth, how they still have to somehow manage to include market economies in various places while they're still decrying evils of capitalism in various respects. I love Star Trek for a lot of reasons, but it is really funny how that works. And in fact, I could go on about this because I love talking about Star Trek, but I won't.
Well, I'll feed into your nerddom. It was not only decried, it was parodied in Deep Space Nine with the was it the Ferengi?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know I forget the laws of
the rules of acquisition.
The rules of acquisition. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, don't get me started.
Sorry, Cody, for referencing a non-black and white program.
That's okay. I've seen Deep Space Nine.
No,
I mean, I wish we were sitting here talking about Leave It to Beaver instead of Trump and Harris. I guess we did a little bit, but
yeah.
Who's have they called Georgia yet?
It's looking pink right now, so they haven't called it yet. I think they're at about 70% reporting, but it's the numbers are kind of close. So yeah, okay. Georgia's pink.
Here, hang Pennsylvania. On. I can let me see if I can present here.
Ooh, show us.
Show you.
I'll say, Doug, your state is light blue, so there's a chance that if you didn't vote for Trump, that you'll be responsible for a Harris one.
Oh, how about that?
I told the one person who really wanted me to vote for Trump that if Trump loses by 1 vote in Pennsylvania, I'll pay off his mortgage.
Oh, that's
You know exactly what I'm talking about, Norm.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
That's where we are now, according to the Associated Press, if you can trust them.
If you can trust them.
Oh, the media, Doug?
Yeah.
The media.
Wow. PA is looking very Harris.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So actually, here, hold on. Let me go. At this point, you're looking at only 22% of votes counted in Pennsylvania. You look at Pennsylvania. That's where we are at the moment. The votes that are being counted so far, you can see that they're all in the cities. That's so this is ballots counted, right? And so the larger the circle, the more ballots have been counted. If I'm understanding this correctly, yep, that's right. And so you'll notice that those are all in the cities. So I realize there's a lot to overcome in terms of the middle states compared to the cities in Pennsylvania. I mean, really, this is a matter of like 3 counties carrying the whole state in typically a blue direction if they do. And so the fact that a lot of these counties out in the middle of nowhere haven't actually been counted yet or reported, this is a little skewed at the moment.
So, are you guys seeing, because I've got one Trumper friend who's already trying to collect any stories he can about election irregularities. Are you seeing that MAGA World is kind of priming the pump for that? Or are you? I
just realized I wasn't sharing this tab that I went into. My bad.
Do you feel like Trump is already trying to make excuses for a potential loss or blaming election interference?
You know, I will. Okay, so there's a couple things. One is over the last few months, you have had the blue team basically preparing our hearts and minds for believing that Donald Trump will challenge the election and for believing that it's going to be so close and that, you know, and so they're planting the seeds that allow them to sort of help, kind of assist them with the narrative in some capacity. I wouldn't put it past Trump to also, for Trump's team to also do this in the sense of like, well, hey, we're going to challenge it. And I actually told a friend yesterday, it might have been this morning. No, it was yesterday. I said, he was like, you don't think that Trump's going to challenge the election? And I said to him, I was like, well, if it's close, do you think Kamala and Trump wins by a very small margin? Do you think Kamala's going to challenge the election? And my friend was like, no, probably not. And I was like, no, I think she will. And she probably should, because if there are shenanigans in a tight race, you have the legal process to help suss that out a little bit. There's not, like, I don't blame anybody who wants to challenge a close election. I realize that there are going to be shenanigans. There are going to be, you know, I mean, Trump's going to say things that make him look stupid. And the media's going to, and the media is not even going to let him just speak for himself and make him look stupid. They're going to like make something else up that makes him supposedly look stupid. And then they're going to look stupid for
you don't have to sell me on it.
Right. I'm just saying, like, they just do a really bad job of making Trump look bad, because then it just comes back to bite them typically.
I tell my liberal friends, if Trump is as bad as he say he is, and I think he might be, don't lie about him. Just tell the truth about him. That's all you have to do.
Right. Yeah. I think there was an Onion article about this was early in Trump's presidency. Is like Trump is mad because the news is just reporting things he just quoting him or something. It's just like, you can get the same result by not lying. That's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was saying earlier in this in Pennsylvania, you can see here on the map. I thought I was sharing that tab on my computer, and it wasn't. Is that basically the larger circles are the Democratic, the cities, the city counties. So Philadelphia County, Allegheny County, and Pittsburgh. And then Bucks County, which is outside of Philadelphia. Those are the typical 3 or 4 counties that are going to typically carry Democrats because they're cities. Awesome. And so so there's I think Trump tweeted that, or somebody was tweeting that Trump is sending law enforcement into Philadelphia, or asking law enforcement to be there. Trump is sending
law enforcement.
No, I said it wrong. Oh,
all right.
Law enforcement is showing up to
Pinkerton Agency.
A what? A what?
The Pinkerton Agency, like 100 years ago.
Yeah. Hey, I want to bring Jacob back because he's one of our fearless leaders on this live stream, and he's been sitting backstage waiting for me to segue, and I'm just going to not do that and say, hey, I'm just going to bring Jacob back on. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Oh, I'm muted. Good. We're doing a 5 wide. We'll do a 5 wide.
Yeah, we are. It's an effort to bring you on. I know that some people have to hop off a little bit, and we can keep chatting with Doc here, and yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It says that those who depart from you leave, so that you know that they were never of you. So.
Except we have a record that they were of us, Jacob.
Yeah, so it had to be an Arminian reading of that.
That's rough, Jacob.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Wow!
He was predestined to make that joke.
Hey, now
I've already moved to the second guest couch, so if people are leaving, I'll move out of the way so Doc can take the
second guest couch
primary guest role.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Cody, to chat with us. Thanks for helping out with the book club and promoting it as well. And stay safe out there. I hear there's going to be a new president soon.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. It was good to meet you, Doc.
Good to meet you too, Cody.
Talk to you soon.
Bye, Cody.
Oh, sorry. Hit the wrong one. There you go, Norm. Yeah,
so, Jake, did you watch Leave It to Beaver when you were younger?
We're still on that.
Well, no, it's test.
Do you prefer Leave It to Beaver or Star Trek? Is really the question of the hour.
So yes, I watched
Sowing Division, Norm.
I have watched Leave It to Beaver, although I couldn't describe an episode to you. I watched it when I was really young with my dad. So I think by default I would prefer Star Trek, even though it's a little bit commie.
If you haven't watched it, there's an episode of the Good News Bad News where Maddie Bellis and I are talking about the Picard show, and there's a clip that is just absolutely phenomenal where you can just kind of watch Matt's soul leave his body as I'm explaining this aspect of the Picard show that is just absolutely horrific to me. And it's so much fun. I have to watch it every couple months or so just because you just kind of see Matt just kind of like he just goes completely downtrodden, and it's like he just exits consciousness for a bit. It's hilarious.
I had a hard time getting into that show, but remembering correctly, did they try to change the Star Trek universe to say that the Federation started to use money when they traditionally hadn't used money? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, there sort of. I mean, when you get into these scenarios in like every single series where they end up having to resort to bartering in some way because they don't have a market economy with which to, oh crap, I don't know how to calculate this. So suddenly they're when they're bargaining to try and get, some special part or some fuel or something like that without I guess I'll have to give them this or whatever. It doesn't make any sense. They have to resort to this because they don't have any other option, and it just looks dumb. And so perennially they tend to just kind of exit that principle every once in a while. And it's really silly. It's really silly.
Well, Norm, do you know that one of the actors, I think on Deep Space, on the Next Generation, left the show because of the what she thought were socialist leanings and moved to a show that she felt that didn't have that. Yeah, Whoopi Goldberg. She moved to The View.
Wait, you're serious?
What?
Are you serious?
No, of course not.
Wow. You really set that one up, man.
I said, popped in my head, she was on there, and now she's on The View. And, you know.
Like some kind of comedian or something.
Sort of.
Well, you know that. So I was wondering if for a moment you were talking about Denise Crosby, but that's I was like, I never knew that about Denise Crosby, but okay.
Oh, Tasha Yar.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. But okay. Never mind. Now we're getting back into real archaic topics. Although, again, if anybody wants me to talk about Star Trek on their shows or something, just invite me. I'll go off.
Open self-invite to
Trek,
any podcast.
Star Trek,
whatsoever.
Star Wars.
I've had Scott Horton on to talk about Star Wars, so I guess I can have you on to talk about Star Trek.
Scott Horton and I can go on for a while.
And then I'll have Doc on the talk about Leave It to Beaver. I guess I'm not sure what the libertarian. There's got to be a libertarian upshoot to Leave It to Beaver. We can figure it out.
It was very black and white.
Yeah. Dum 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 dum.
Thank you for laughing. At least some. That was a lame joke.
Pennsylvania's starting to narrow, like you predicted, Doug. It's now down to 55 to 43%.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's just how it's gonna go. I have a question for you guys. Do you guys watch these election trackers where you see the race? One guy's going this way and one guy's going this way, and it's like, who can cross 270 first? And it's like a scoreboard, even though it's not really a scoreboard. Like, it is in the sense, but it's not like they're both, like. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say? It doesn't seem like it's an actual scoreboard, so you get this impression that like so and so's ahead. I remember looking at this as a kid and be like, oh, Trump's pulling ahead, or oh, Kamala's pulling ahead, or whatever. And it's like, you're just like, oh no. And if you're a Kamala supporter right now, you're just like, oh my goodness, she's down. She's only got 99 and Trump has 178. Oh man, she's got to really pull. And it's like, no, hold on. There's just a whole lot of other factors here that's like a wrong way to think about it. It's not like an actual race.
I had a conversation with one of my kids about that. He says, Dad, Trump's ahead. And son, and basically I said, son, there's this thing called California coming up.
Yeah. What is it? Let's see. They have
got to remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I always get annoyed by the language, like first to 270 wins. It's like they can't both have 270. Like that math doesn't math.
That's not how you math.
Yeah.
First two is the funny part. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh golly.
Any predictions, Doc? If Kamala wins, what is your prediction over the next 4 years? And then you can answer for Trump when you're done with that.
If Kamala
wins, do you have a prediction? While you're thinking, can I tell you a prediction?
Yeah.
If Kamala wins, we will see a headline written by somebody in, say, The Atlantic or some similar leftist kind of rag, explaining why using the phrase word salad is racist. You got to admit, that's a pretty solid, that's a very specific but solid prediction.
The win in the next year?
Oh, over the course of her presidency.
4 years. 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, yeah.
Do you?
I hate to fall into the trap, the parody of the Trump is Hitler, but just applying that to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
You think she's gonna grow a mustache?
Me off too.
Well, with time. No, I think it's going to empower more people to be even more expressive about their opinions. I think socially it's going to have big impacts. there's this thing of we won, so we must be right, and that's a logical fallacy. And it's a logical fallacy on both sides. We won, so we must be right. And Trump would have that same fallacy. Again, to take this to the theological side, I remember, well, put it this way. If numbers determine who's right, then Joel Osteen is the most righteous pastor in America.
Amen. While we're being funny.
No.
Yeah.
But see, there's also an opposite. There's an opposite corollary, though, where some Christians think that they're right because they're the smallest minority of true believers that exist.
Do you know from experience, Jacob, or what?
Jacob, I got to correct you.
Well, I mean, I don't. You can take that
claiming to be Christians.
Very good. You could take that as a diss in some sense, but I actually did kind of sort of experience that growing up, not because I believed it per se, but because that's what I was taught.
Oh, that's what I mean. I grew up in like charismatic and Pentecostal churches, so yeah, it was very much like we got the Holy Spirit. No one else does. Yeah. I haven't had a chance to answer this question about 4 years of Harris, but part of the reason why I voted Trump is that although he's not anti-war, he's compared to Harris. Like I think 4 years of Harris, I feel like every election cycle, people are like sounding the alarm about World War III, but I don't know that the world can survive 4 more years of Harris. Or I mean, maybe it can, but it's going to get much uglier, I think. I mean, she seems to be leaning into every, like, usually presidents will do their drone strikes and then they pick like one country to saber rattle with. Harris is like, what if I just saber rattle with all of them all at once?
And like in pokers, there's tells. If you see someone wearing a cross around their neck, you might assume they're a Christian, Star of David, Jewish. If you see someone wearing the Cheney family around their neck.
Yeah. No, I mean,
this doesn't do much to make me feel good.
Listen, nothing has really changed for me. Like I used to be a Democrat, like a Bernie Sanders anti-war leftist, and my rule was just always vote against the Cheneys. So I mean, I'm just voting my principles here.
Your original principle.
Yeah.
Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Lon Cheney.
Yeah.
Pick a Cheney. Yeah.
Wow. Pick a Cheney.
Yeah, it's a good principle.
Any
War
Cheney.
sucks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the very least, like Trump's not anti-war, but at least the right like pretends to be anti-war and is marginally better on stuff. I mean, they're not great on the Israel one, but and here's the problem. Like we were talking about tariffs earlier, but it's like I don't know what the lesser evil is here because it's like on one hand, tariffs are bad, they're taxes, but the tariffs are an outgrowth of this isolationist, like nationalist sentiment, which has its drawbacks, but it would sort of lean into America becoming more of a republic again and less of an empire, versus Harris would continue, there'd be no tariffs, I guess. There'd probably be other taxes, but there would be a continuation of the empire and a sort of like, at least a continuing of the sort of like, military status quo. So I don't know. I mean, that's at least the stuff going through my head when I'm and why I'm inclined to care a little bit more about this election. I mean, I get like we named this the most important election of our lifetime in kind of like the troll lettering, which I get. But like the boy who cried wolf eventually saw a wolf. So I mean, at some point, and I also think I think Dave Smith made this point in one of his recent episodes that like this is kind of one of the features of democracy, right? Like it is kind of just ever rising stakes. So it is like it's a meme, but it's also kind of true that every election is kind of the most important because the government just keeps growing bigger and bigger, so the stakes keep getting higher and higher. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
I am not particularly high on any candidate winning. Pretty clearly, I don't think that there's really any predominant.
If they could
plan.
all lose, I would go for that. But
really, the true losers of this election are us, the people of this country, because there's almost no outcome that's a net that I feel is like going to be a net good. There are going to be marginal improvements in various ways. I do think that there are ways in which a Trump victory could have marginal improvements, but they're not universal, and it is not clear to me that they are on net good. But similarly, I mean, I feel a little more confident, perhaps, that a Harris administration is an overall net bad. But it doesn't. There are some things that could theoretically be on, perhaps a bit of a net good. It's unclear whether that really even gets close to outweighing the potential net bads. So it's like there's no victory here. So the question is like, well, what are we supposed to do with that? And I think that there's just like that. This is why I think it's just these are events that allow us to point the finger and say, this is the man. I mean, and using that kind of phraseology to suggest like these are the problem people. These are the principles that we need in order to actually make progress. And we have I like to say, we have every tool that God has provided us with a world that is chock full of ability to create win-win situations, and yet humans manage to completely find new ways to screw it up. And they find ever increasing ways of screwing it all up, and it's incredible. But it's incumbent on us to point out what those are. Like that this is not the way you build peace and prosperity. Mm-hmm. This is, I like, what are our predictions, or what is mine? Well, like, do you like what? Oh, I'm going to be so happy if inflation is not 10% and instead is 6%. Like, I mean, great. Okay, at least it's that much better, I guess, or something.
But I confess, I will be happy if that happens.
Right.
I got 8 mouths to feed, including my own. I get your point, though. I totally get your point. But if I could have less pain, if the beatings would go down to once a week as opposed to every day,
like you're okay. Point well taken. Like, it could be the case that an act of policy could make it possible for inflation to go down from like 10% to 6%. Guess what? There are you could make the case potentially that some of the policies that have happened in the past 2 years did result in kind of that happening, and yet we're still mad at the government, and rightfully so, for them still promoting policies that continue to build inflation. So is it really that much better? Because we still should be it still should be a problem. So I don't mean to like get on your case about it or anything per se, but like,
no, I don't
get where I'm coming at there. Like,
yeah.
So it's like, sure, yeah, I'm like, it's on the margin better, but it's still a net bad.
Well, can I ask, like, what do you make? I obviously listen. I'll admit it was a fanboy moment. I saw a chain of tweets where people are tweeting at Elon about Ron Paul being part of a Department of Government Efficiency, and Ron Paul says, like, heck yeah, let's talk and let's do it. And so I'm just like, okay, what do I got to lose, right? Like, one of these two people are going to win. The one is at least like, maybe it's a lie or it's not going to happen, but they're dangling Ron Paul in front of me. So like, whatever, I'm going to take a swing at that. But let's say that doesn't happen, and there's a fair chance of, well, Ron Paul is really old. The idea of him getting back involved in government at this age is
89 years old.
Yeah.
Why would you put him through that hell? Like,
I mean, listen, part of me is like, again,
it doesn't take long
looking
to just say end it, done, and like he only needs to be there for like what, a week?
Right? Government efficiency. Okay. He's like, actually, you should name this the Department of Government deficiency, or it's just like, it's everything. Like, it's just get rid of it.
Government efficiency is an oxymoron.
Right, exactly. But
yeah.
But isn't it at least a net positive in the slow march towards liberty that like libertarian ideas are being injected into the conversation in a way that I haven't really seen in my lifetime, except coincidentally, like a little bit when Ron Paul was a really big thing when he was running. But it's like, again, these guys aren't perfect. Elon Musk, Robert Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, they're not libertarians, but they're at least like, I don't know, like they're more than a standard deviation improved from kind of the status quo that I'm used to being in our government, let alone in the Republican Party. So it's like, I don't know, like, is that a hope for like where we're at as a culture that, and maybe as like the liberty movement, that libertarians and libertarian ideas have to be appealed to somewhat?
Yeah, I think so. I'll take hope where I can get it. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't pan out, well, then I'm still going to keep doing what I need to do.
Yeah, I don't like promote the conversation. That's great. Just don't have expectations that they're actually going to come through. I mean, I expect, when Ron has the opportunity to make a positive impact for liberty through just talking, that he's going to do it.
Right.
Like, so
and that's all I'm saying. It's like, and if Trump's in office and Elon's in his orbit, I'm like, listen, like, is it going to usher in, Ancapistan? No, but it's, I don't know, like, there's at least something there that's materially different than I think in most other elections, even though I know that Trump will govern as a statist and do all sorts of things that I am going to continue to call out. I also think it's interesting that, sorry, not interesting. I think it's one of the few things that he's talked about that I think he will do, because it's such an easy thing to do, is freeing Ross Ulbricht, which I think is, another thing that went into I think the calculus for a lot of libertarians this year, because he actually said he was going to free Ross last term and signed the papers, but then the I guess like the Attorney General slow walked it because he was on his way out. But he said he's going to do it on day one. Now maybe he's lying, but in terms of like all the things he said he's going to do, like he can't abolish the income tax in one fell swoop, and he can't.
I like one fell swoop. That's good.
One fell swoop, yeah. He can't. Just bring all the troops. Even if he wanted to, he can't just bring all the troops home, the day he gets into office. But it doesn't take much to sign the pardon papers for Ross. And I mean, that would be I think, sure, it's one person, but I think the symbolic impact of Ross being freed. Rossi was, basically a political prisoner because he did what we talked about. He created a free market thing and had his life ruined for it.
Let's see him pardon Julian Assange too. Maybe we let's see.
Well, I agree. That's been brought up to him too. Yeah. And I mean, he should have done this stuff last time, so it's not like he gets a pass.
See that's kind of like when you let me pull a Jacob Winograd here and quote a little scripture at you. If you can be trusted with a little, you can be trusted with much.
Yes.
Right? Was he trustworthy with a little?
It just compared to what though, right?
Compared to what? But like, this is where you point the finger and say you're the man. Like this is. I
get where you're coming from. I guess I don't know. See, to me, I'm like a hopeless optimist. I'm like, you know what? Like, even if I'm overplaying the little tiny grain of sand that's like a tiny win, it's like we don't get much. Like in the liberty movement, most of the wins we get are like we convince people that libertarianism is true, and it's like, great, welcome to the losing team. Right?
I should tell you on Sunday I was at a soccer game and sitting beside a parent who's a friend of mine, parent of it was my daughter's soccer game, and there was another parent there, and he goes, so Doug, what are the libertarians going to do on Tuesday? And I just was like, lose. Like, like we're real good at missing a bit. It's like, well, we're gonna lose. Like, what do you mean? Like, and a lot of people, I know what they mean. It's like, well, who are you gonna vote for as a libertarian? You don't have somebody, whatever. And even though we typically do, actually always do, I suppose. And anyway, that's kind of the I would say in some sense that's the point you're making, Jacob, is that we can get wins in the well, at least one major party to some extent. Maybe the Democrats can offer something like criminal justice reform. They used to be about that. So there's these wins of influence, and to me that sounds like one of the approaches that some people in the Libertarian Party are making. It's like, how can the LP and its momentum in some capacity influence one of the candidates?
Doug, criminal justice reform from the candidate that joked about smoking weed in college with Howard Stern.
Trust me.
Wow.
I know. It's like,
you know.
No, I get it. Joe Biden is one of the reasons we even need this in the first place. No, but they used to be about it. Like before Biden and Kamala. Yeah, no. They used to be. No, and Republicans were like, no, we don't need that. We just put people in prison. And people just need to obey the law. And if you don't argue with the police officer, and because if you don't argue, if you just submit, they're not going to kill you. That's usually
what
a
an
right-wing
argument. What an argument. Oh,
you realize that's worse, right?
Yeah.
Like I understand that, yes, that's very practical advice, but that's very immoral and unethical situation you're describing here. But anyway, yeah, I'm done.
Well, we have made tremendous progress against the drug war over the course of the last decade in particular, and it's probably only getting better in that respect. And I think that these are opportunities with which we can lever into other policy discussions if we just will take that opportunity. I was like, it's baffling to me that we have, that there's this massive misunderstanding of like the actual problems that are immigration, like that involve immigration policy, and how integrally related that is to foreign policy, and in particular the drug war. So we have the capacity, like we have all of the best data. We have the best data. The best. I can't even do it. I need Maddie to help me out with this.
We have the best data.
The best data. The best words.
Oh, Matt, we miss you.
We understand.
Listen. Norman Horn is a great statistician. He gets the best data and makes the best arguments for faith and liberty.
Well,
nice.
I mean, come on. It's they're just plants. They shouldn't have to go to jail for them. I mean, like you don't have to approve of what people do with marijuana in order to say that they shouldn't go to jail for it. That's pretty obvious, and we've made that argument. We've made that argument long enough. Like, let's start telling people that this actually affects the other things you care about too. And if you just would make an impact in one, you'll begin to see net positive results. And then that's a train you can keep rolling.
I agree. Checking in here, Donald is gaining ground on Kamala here in PA. It's 51.2 to 47.9.
Yeah, so, we have pointed out, by the way, that the reason you guys are so caring about PA is that you live there. So.
Well, no, it's not just that. It's
that's the reason everybody's begging me to vote for Trump. They're like, Doug, your state's the one that's going to help tip the election. And I'm like, well,
it kind of is. I mean,
it might be, yeah.
Georgia's still holding for Trump. I mean, it's
Georgia's 52-46 with 73% reporting.
Mine shows 80%
19
reporting.
Minutes ago. Or excuse me, 73%. Is that what I said?
Yeah. Mine says 80% reporting, and it's 52 to 47.
Yours is probably more up to date. I was looking at a tweet from 20 minutes ago.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, well, that's like ancient.
What a mess.
I mean, all the West Coast states aren't reporting yet, but I mean, I don't know if any.
Well,
of them
nobody assumes Washington, Oregon, California is going to go for anybody other than Harris. And I think there's sort of like general predictions about a few things. So.
Well, yeah, she locked that up with Schwarzenegger's endorsement. I mean, it was iffy. And that's a Lou Perez joke. That's not mine. I got to give credit to him.
Well, who was it earlier?
We should have had Lou come on. He would have been fun too. Fun.
Oh, Lou's great.
Who was it earlier? I forget which guest who was saying that like the problem is that the media tries to. I think it was Cody saying like Donald Trump's bad. Like you think he's like Hitler. Like maybe he is, but like don't lie about him. And like I gotta tell you, it's so frustrating.
Bad. You'll figure it out. Yeah.
Well, it's just like all you hear. Like the only reason I hear anyone is voting for Harris against Trump is it's like because of January 6th and mud democracy and just like that is the lamest reason to vote against Donald Trump.
And Dobbs. Dobbs is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you saying that Sam Harris is lame, Jacob?
I mean, that's about the nicest thing I could say about it.
He has a. I'll say something nice about Sam Harris. He has a nice calming voice for a meditation app.
Okay.
That's always good.
Well, we got I guess 5 minutes here till we're supposed to end.
It's supposed to.
Supposed to
we
end.
don't have to.
Or
I mean,
we can drag it on and hang out with.
We have the power. I mean, we are the
Sam
masters
Harris,
of our own
the
domain.
Velveteen Church Mouse.
See, there were some comments. Voluntary Liberal said tariffs are a band-aid for a knife stab. We need to take the knife out. Yeah, I agree with that. I gotta say I don't understand. I don't even know what, like, I get that there's maybe like other countries who don't maybe play nice with our trade relationships, but like that seems to me to be like there's so much lower hanging fruit, which Trump does talk about, doesn't always do, but like just cutting the regulation and red tape and stuff that makes it harder for people to do business here and to manufacture here. Like, doesn't that seem like it kind of feels like you're not even addressing the core problem? Like, I don't think that all the manufacturing left the U.S. because we didn't have tariffs. It left because it became too expensive to do manufacturing here.
Yeah. Like, and they also don't seem to understand the way that tariffs actually work most of the time. Like, okay, so let's suppose for a second that you put a tariff on China that will, increases the price of that good, like it doubles that cost. Well, you know what you're going to do? You're going to do precisely what my company did, which is look strategically at alternatives to where we can just move to, say, what if we move to India? What if we move to Sri Lanka? What if we go to the Philippines? What if we go to Vietnam? What if we go to Korea? And we look at those alternatives and we just move different places. Like, because we can figure that out. Like, yeah, it's troublesome to us, but what's our alternative? Like, I mean, these are not like, and in addition, by the way, there are other ways in which you can export a good from China, and as long as it gets materially affected in another country, then a lot of times the tariff problem goes away. So, for instance, you might say, okay, maybe what we'll do is we'll do a bunch of manufacturing here in China, but then we'll ship that to Taiwan, and then we'll materially affect it there. And then the tariff goes away, and it's less expensive to do that than to follow the tariffs. Guess what? That's what people are going to do, and that's what big companies do. That's what small companies do, like ours, and so on. Like, these are, but this is why tariffs don't work either. Not in the end. Like, it's not doing, like, what it does do is that it presents a challenge to China to make a fix on its policies so that it does affect their own growth. So as a threat to China, there's something to it, but as a way of bringing manufacturing back to America like it's marketed, no, it does not. And that's not what's going to happen.
You have the doo-doo laughs out of your system, Doug?
What's that?
You have the doo-doo laugh out of your system, Doug?
Yes. Why? Do you have another one that you're going to test me with?
No, I don't know.
Oh, no, that's the end of it.
Well,
what you were saying about the Trump and the tariffs and not realizing all the unintended consequences that will happen, people getting around it, reminds me of the thing from 2016 when in the debate, Hillary was calling him on, he's not paying taxes. And Trump said, well, you wrote the laws. I hired people to get around them. Well, it's the same principle.
It's not even that they're writing to get around them. like this is like the whole principle of tax avoidance, right?
Yeah.
Like it's important to understand how you can avoid as much taxes as possible. In like from a legal standpoint, you are entitled to do that, and you should. And so, that's what he's doing. It's when he said, so I think one thing he said was, it doesn't make me bad or something. That makes me smart, is what he said. And that's correct. That is exactly, that is exactly what was meant. And you have to hand it to him. Like that was a good moment for him. Is it also kind of finally pulled the rug out from under them from their argument standpoint. It's like, yeah, congratulations. You just
where we stand so far, Doug. Where are we looking at in PA?
All right. Well, at this point,
that dot map you had.
Yeah, the dot map. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up with this. And let's see, Pennsylvania, because that's one big state that's important.
Oh, just closing.
Refreshed. Yeah. So he is closing in. Actually, this is. Yeah, we got 43% are in. I'm still pretty safe. I don't have to buy my friend's house. For those who were not here 3 hours ago when I said this, sorry. Thanks for being here for the later part. So yeah, basically we're looking at the ballots counted. There's more ballots counted in the cities at this point, which are going to lean toward Harris, lean Democrat, and there's not a lot counted out in the country. So if all of the country folk comes out and votes, might tip the election. Might tip the election for Donald Trump for Pennsylvania.
Oh, man,
I used to be one of those country folk up there.
Yeah,
Westmoreland County. You know the old Carvel line, Pennsylvania's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in between.
Yep, I do. I always forget who said it. Now, so he was what to Bill Clinton when he said that? Campaign advisor. Yeah, okay.
Advisor.
James
Yeah.
Carvel. Isn't he married? Who's he married to?
He's married to Mary Matlin, I think, who's a conservative.
And she's like a Republican. Yeah. And because I remember listening. This is probably 20 years ago. Listening to some interview with the two of them about how they get along in their marriage, being so like literally entrenched in the different parties. And I thought that was interesting. So, yeah, Jacob, any final words? You want to see us out?
Yeah, I think this comment here from Voluntary Liberal is a prudent way to end this stream.
Oh, yeah.
He said, maybe I'm biased, but I think the ideas of liberty will inevitably win out. Statism is unsustainable and will crumble even if we don't live to see it. Yeah, I mean, just as
your mother named you very properly, Voluntary Liberal. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think it's a real. That'd be funny though. I think that I made a point of saying this in several of my tweets over the last few days that like at the end of the day, like the politics of today matter not in comparison to the ultimate final combination of Christ and his kingdom that we as Christians believe as proclaimers of his gospel. But I also think a corollary of that is that as people are not just as people are transformed individually as they become Christians, but I think that just as the truth wins out in society, that, yeah, I do think that, what did Ron Paul always say? That about good ideas whose day have come, like that they can't ultimately lose. And like, it is a slow march to liberty, but I think that just as like slavery was abolished and just as monarchies have started to fade out, like we're figuring it out. It's not as quick as we want it to be, but I keep on just coming up with slogans here, but the line of history bends towards justice and liberty, I would say, in the end. So we just got to keep up the good fight and try to make sure that these psychopathic maniacs don't blow us up before we get there.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, that's good. Against psychopathic maniacs. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to end this live stream with following up on Jacob's just endless barrage of cliches and say, and that's the way it was.
Wow.